for many miles without water. She was desperate for a drink. The Frog and the Ox, and Other Fables, compiled by Vic Parker. The Thirsty Pigeon. There was once a pigeon who had flown for many miles without water. She was desperate for a drink, but could not find a lake, a pond, or even a puddle to sip from. Suddenly she noticed a goblet of water painted on a signboard. The pigeon had no idea that it was only a picture, so she flew towards it excitedly. Bang! She crashed right into the signboard, then slid to the ground, her head spinning. After that, the silly pigeon learnt to always take more care. Enthusiasm should not outrun being cautious. The Two Crabs. There was once a mother crab and her child who lived on the seabed. The mother crab took great care to teach the little crab good manners and behaviors. One day the mother crab said that she would take her little one up to the seashore as a treat. "But you must be on your best behavior," she said. "I don't want all the land creatures thinking that we sea creatures are common." "I will try, Mother," promised the little crab. So up, up, up they went until they reached the sandy shore. Once there, they decided to go for a stroll. They hadn't gone far when the mother crab hissed at her child. "You are walking ungracefully. You should try to walk forwards without twisting from side to side." "I will try," said the young crab. "Please show me how, and I will follow you." It is best to lead by example. The Man and the Satyr. Long, long ago, creatures called satyrs, which were half man, half goat, lived alongside humans. One bitterly cold winter's night, a man had lost his way in a deep, dark wood. As he was trying to find his way home, he stumbled across a satyr who was gathering firewood. The satyr was kind and helpful. As soon as he discovered that the man had lost his way, he asked him back to his own house. "You can stay with me for the night," the satyr offered. "I will guide you out of the forest in the morning." The man gratefully accepted the satyr's offer and went along with him to his little wooden hut. As they walked through the forest, the satyr noticed that the man kept raising his hands to his mouth and blowing on them. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but why do you keep doing that?" asked the satyr. "My hands are numb with the cold," said the man, "and my hot breath warms them up." "I see," said the satyr thoughtfully, and continued leading the way to his home. The little wooden hut wasn't much further on, which the man was very glad to see. Soon the pair were both inside in the warm, and the satyr put a steaming bowl of porridge before the man, who happily picked up a spoon to eat. But when he raised the spoon to his mouth, he began blowing upon it. The satyr looked puzzled. "May I ask why you are doing that?" he said. "Well, the porridge is too hot, and my breath will cool it," explained the man. To the man's great surprise, the satyr suddenly stood up, opened the door, and bundled him out into the cold and dark. "Out you go," said the satyr. "I'm not sure what you are, but I will have nothing to do with you. If you can blow hot and cold with the same breath, you must be dangerous." But, the man tried to explain, but he was talking to the door. Never trust a changeable person. The Horse and His Rider. There was once a young man who fancied himself to be a good rider. One market day he saw a fine-looking horse for sale and was determined to ride it. He did not know that the horse had not been properly broken in, and he didn't think to ask. He just climbed a nearby fence and dropped onto the horse's back, regardless. The second the horse felt a rider's weight in the saddle, it set off at full gallop, with the young man hanging on for dear life. One of the rider's friends saw him thundering down the road. Surprised, he called out, Where are you off to in such a hurry?" Gasping for breath, the young man pointed to the stallion and replied, "I have no idea. You will have to ask the horse." Act in haste, and you will have to go along with the consequences. The Man, the Boy, and the Donkey. There was once a man and his son who were on their way to market with their donkey. They walked along the road, leading the donkey behind them, minding their own business. After a while, a countryman passed by them and shouted out, "You fools! What is a donkey for but to ride upon?" The man looked at the boy, and the boy looked at the man, and they both said, "Why, he is right." So the man put his son on the donkey, and they went on their way. A little while later they passed a group of men, and they heard one of them say, "Look at that lazy youngster. He allows his poor father to walk in this heat while he rides on the donkey. Shame on him." The man looked at the boy, and the boy looked at the man, and they both said, "Why, he is right." So the man ordered his son to climb down, and he got on the donkey himself. They hadn't traveled much further when they passed two women. One woman pointed at the man on the donkey and shouted, "Shame on that lazy lout, making his poor little son trudge along while he rides on the donkey." The man looked at the boy, and the boy looked at the man, and they both felt rather confused by this. The man thought for a while, uncertain of what to do next. Eventually he pulled his son up before him on the donkey so they could both travel in comfort, and they carried on with their journey. By this time they had come to the town, and passers-by began to jeer and point at them. The man stopped and asked what they were pointing at. One man said, "Aren't you ashamed of yourself for overloading that poor donkey?" The man looked at the boy, and the boy looked at the man, and they both got off the donkey at once. They stood wondering what to do. They thought and thought, until at last they took a pole, tied the donkey's feet to it, and raised the pole and the donkey to their shoulders. They went along amid the laughter of all who met them, until they came to a bridge. Then the donkey, getting one of its feet loose, kicked out and broke free. Off it ran, never to be seen again by the man or his son. "That will teach you," said an old man who had followed them along the way. "You can't please everybody. Please all, and you will please none." The Frog and the Ox. Once upon a time, a young frog was sitting with his father by the side of a pool. The pool was shady and cool, and the frogs were sitting happily among some rocks. They watched for passing flies, minding their own business and chatting to pass the time. "Oh, father," said the little frog, "I have seen such a terrible monster. It was as big as a mountain, with horns on its head and a long tail, and it had hoofs divided in two." "Hush, child, hush," said the father frog. "That was only Farmer White's ox. It isn't so big either. It may be a little bit taller than I, but I could easily make myself quite as broad. Just you see." With that, the frog blew himself out, and blew himself out, and blew himself out. "Was he as big as that?" he asked. The young frog looked and thought for a second. "Oh, much bigger than that," he said, shrugging his shoulders. Again the father frog blew himself out, and blew himself out, and blew himself out. Then he asked his son if the ox was as big as that. The little frog looked and thought for a minute. "Bigger, father, bigger," he replied, shaking his head. So the father frog took a deep breath and blew himself out, and blew himself out, and blew himself out. And he swelled, and he swelled, and he swelled. And then he said, "I'm sure the ox is not as big as—" But at that very minute, all the breath whooshed out of him, and he flew up and away, zipping around like a balloon. "Wow!" said the little frog. "The ox was big, but he couldn't do that." Pride comes before a fall. The Fox and the Grapes. It was a hot summer's day, with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the trees and the bees buzzing lazily around the nodding flowers in the meadows. A fox came strolling through an orchard, humming happily to himself, when he suddenly noticed a bunch of juicy grapes just ripening on a vine. The fox licked his lips. "Those delicious grapes would be just the thing to quench my thirst," he said to himself. But the only problem was he couldn't reach them. The vine was hanging on a branch way up overhead. Nevertheless, the fox was determined to have the grapes for himself. He stepped back several paces, took a run up, and jumped as high as he could. He just missed. "If at first you don't succeed, try, and try again," said the fox, turning round to try again. 1, 2, 3, he counted, and he was off, jumping up even higher than before. But again, the fox could not reach the grapes. Again and again he tried to reach the tempting morsel, until he was even redder in the face than usual and quite worn out. All the creatures in the orchard, from the worms to the bugs and the birds, were laughing. At last the fox had to admit defeat, and he gave up. As he walked away to the sound of sniggering, he stuck his nose in the air and said, "I am sure they are sour anyway." It was easy to look down on what you cannot get. The gnat and the bull. There was once a huge bull who spent his days grazing in a field. One day a tiny gnat came along and landed on one of the bull's horns for a rest. The gnat found the place to his liking and remained sitting there for a long time. He was quite nervous, for he knew that if he bothered the bull, the massive creature could kill him with a flick of his tail. However, as the bull had not said anything, he decided to boldly stay as long as he could. Finally, the gnat had rested enough and was about to fly away when he politely asked the bull, "Do you mind if I go now?" The bull merely raised his eyes and said without interest, "It makes no difference to me. I didn't notice when you arrived, and I won't know when you leave." We may be more important in our own eyes than in the eyes of others. The Lion, the Mouse, and the Fox. A lion was once asleep when a mouse ran over his back. The mouse's feet tickled the lion, and he woke with a start. He had no idea why he had been so suddenly awoken, and looked around to see what had disturbed him. A fox lurking nearby had seen this happen, and he thought it would be great fun to have a joke at the lion's expense. "This is the first time I've seen a lion afraid of a mouse," said the fox loudly. The lion was embarrassed, but tried to pretend he wasn't. "Afraid of a mouse?" he said. "Not I. It's his bad manners I can't stand." If you take a small liberty with someone, it might cause great offense. The fawn and his mother. There was once a deer who had a baby fawn. She cared for him well, and the fawn grew to be big and strong. However, he seemed to be afraid of everything. He would jump at the slightest rustle of a bush and start at the smallest snap of a twig. If he ever heard the barking of a dog, even in the distance, he would be off as fast as his legs could carry him. One day the mother deer looked at her son and said, "My boy, nature has given you a powerful body and a stout pair of antlers. You could charge at anything with those and run them right through. I can't think why you are such a coward as to run away from everything." Just then they both heard the sound of a pack of hounds in full cry. They knew that huntsmen must be coming. "You stay where you are," said the deer. "Don't worry about me." And with that, she ran off as fast as her legs could carry her. No arguments will give courage to the coward. The Bald Huntsman. There was once a man who had a fine head of hair. However, as he grew old, it began to fall out, and he ended up entirely bald. The man didn't like being bald and worried that people might think he looked better before. So he had a wig made, which was just like his own hairstyle, so the man thought no one would notice. One day the man went hunting with friends. He was wearing his wig as usual, with his hat perched on top. It was a windy day, so the man didn't get very far before a particularly big gust of wind caught his hat and carried it off, with his wig too. How all the other huntsmen laughed! The man had a good sense of humor. He entered into the joke and said, "If the hair that wig is made of didn't stick to the head on which it grew, no wonder it won't stick to mine." Laugh, and the world laughs with you. The Fox and the Mask. There was once a fox who got into the storeroom of a theater. He strolled round examining the scenery, costumes, and props, wondering what everything was. The fox was delighted when he came across what looked like a leg of chicken and a hunk of cheese. But when he bit into them, yuck! He found they were only made of paper and glue. As he turned to see if he could find any real food, the fox saw a face glaring down at him. He sprang back in fear, but the face didn't move. The fox became a little bolder and stopped shrinking back. Still the face did not do so much as blink. Then the fox stepped closer. The face did not flinch. He stuck his tongue out and blew a raspberry. It was only a mask, the type actors use to put over their faces. "Ah," said the fox, "you look very fine. It's a pity you don't have any brains." Outside show is a poor substitute for inner worth. The Oxen and the Axle Trees. Once upon a time, a pair of oxen were drawing a heavily loaded wagon along the highway. As they tugged and strained, a part of the wagon, called the axle trees, began to creak and groan with the strain. The more the oxen heaved and pulled, the more the axle trees squealed and moaned. This annoyed the oxen dreadfully. Finally, the temper of one snapped. With a great bellow, he turned round and looked back at the wagon, shouting, "Hey, you there! Why do you make such a noise when we do all the work?" People who have the least to put up with often complain the most. Hercules and the Wagoner. There was once a wagoner who was driving a cart with a heavy load. It had been raining and the road was muddy. The horse heaved the cart along, and the wagoner guided him on to the firmest parts of the road. Despite this, the wheels sank in the mud. The wagoner set his shoulder to the cart and urged the horse forwards. But the more they heaved, the deeper the wheels sank. So the wagoner prayed to the ancient hero Hercules, who was famous for his great strength. "Hercules, please help me," he cried. "You called?" came a booming voice. The wagoner spun round to see a giant of a man with a lion's skin wrapped round his shoulders. Hercules, for it was he, said, "Don't just stand there. I'm not going to do it for you. Set your shoulder to the wheel for one more push, and this time I'll help." Fate helps those who help themselves. The Mice and the Weasels and Other Fables, compiled by Vic Parker. The Wolf and the Kid. Goats are very good at scrambling up and down steep mountainsides, climbing where others can't go. Once upon a time, a kid clambered on top of a store shed in the farmyard and perched on the roof, looking down proudly on everyone below. Just then, a wolf slunk by, casting his eyes around greedily for a possible meal. Immediately, the kid began to tease and taunt the wolf, for he felt quite safe up on the roof. "Mr. Wolf," he cried, "you are a murderer and a thief. I don't know how you dare show your face near the homes of honest folk. We know the crimes you commit." "Curse away, my young friend," said the wolf. "You are only being so bold because you know that I can't get my claws into you at the moment. It is easy to be brave when you are a safe distance from danger." The Bald Man and the Fly. It was a hot summer's day, and a bald man who had finished work sat down under a shady tree to rest. How pleasant it was, relaxing in the cool. His eyelids began to droop and his head started to nod. Just as the man was about to fall asleep, a fly began hovering round his head. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The man was very annoyed. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The fly zipped this way and that, darting forwards and stinging him here and there. The bald man was hugely annoyed and began swatting at his enemy, aiming blow after blow at the buzzing creature. But again and again he missed, and his hand landed on his own head instead. Still, the fly tormented him. Finally the man gave up, allowing the fly to buzz where it liked. "I will hurt myself more than it is hurting me if I carry on," he said to himself. If you seek to harm an enemy, you may only end up hurting yourself. The Fisherman Peeping. One day a fisherman had a new idea for how he might catch fish. He thought that if he took his flute to the river bank and played a jolly tune, the fish might hear the music and come to the surface and dance, making it easy for the fisherman to catch them. So he began to play one merry tune after another, but not a single fish put so much as its nose out of the water. The fisherman gave up, laid down his flute, and went back to his old method of just casting his net into the water. To his astonishment, when he drew the net in, it was heavy with fish. Then the fisherman took up his flute and played again, and as he played, the fish flipped and flapped in the net. "Ah, you dance now when I play," said he. "Yes," replied an old fish, "now we have no choice." When you are in a person's power, you must do as they bid. The Ants. Long ago, ants were once people and made their living by farming the land. However, people weren't content with the results of their own hard work. They were always looking longingly at their neighbors' crops, which seemed much better than their own. Whenever they could lay their hands on their neighbors' produce, they stole it and hid it in their storehouses. In those days, the gods and goddesses of Mount Olympus ruled the world. When Father of the Gods, Jupiter, saw how things had become, he was disgusted with humankind. He was so furious that he changed people into ants. However, although their bodies changed, their nature remained the same. So to this day, people go about the cornfields and gather the fruits of others' labors and store them up for their own use. You may punish a thief, but he will always remain a thief. The Mice and the Weasels. The mice and the weasels were sworn enemies, and there came a time when things got so bad that they went to war. They fought battle after battle, but the mice always came off the worst, with many being killed and eaten by the weasels. At last, the mice realized that they were near to being defeated once and for all. So they called a meeting to discuss if there was anything they could do that they had not already thought of to avoid disaster. All of the oldest, wisest mice were there, solemnly putting their heads together to try to think of plans. Then one old mouse got up to speak. "It's no wonder we are always beaten, for we have no generals to plan our battles and direct the movements of our troops in the field." This made a lot of sense to the other mice, and they acted on his advice. They at once chose the biggest mice to be their generals. These mice, in order to be marked out as different from the foot soldiers, wore big helmets decorated with plumes of straw. The generals then led the mice to battle, confident of victory. However, they were defeated as usual. Soon, all the mice were scampering as fast as they could back to their holes. They all made their way to safety without difficulty, except the generals. They couldn't squeeze into their holes because their helmets were too broad and the plumes of straw on top were too tall. So they were left to the clutches of the weasels. Greatness carries its own dangers and punishments. The Bee and Jupiter. Long, long ago, when the world was very young, great gods and goddesses ruled Earth from their home on Mount Olympus. One day, a queen bee flew up to Olympus with some fresh honey from her hive. It was a present for the king of the gods, Jupiter. Jupiter was highly pleased with the bee's thoughtful gift. In return, he promised to give the delighted queen bee anything she liked. The insect thought hard. She did not want to waste such a wonderful reward. Finally, she announced that she would be grateful to Jupiter if he would give stingers to her and all her kind. Jupiter was taken aback by this and asked why. The queen explained that it would allow them to sting people who stole their honey. Jupiter wasn't happy about this, for he loved humankind, but he had given his word, so he agreed. Yet the stingers he gave were of such a kind that whenever a bee stings someone, the sting is left in the wound and the bee dies. Evil wishes always come home to roost. The Fir Tree and the Bramble. There was once a forest in which lived a very proud fir tree. She thought she was better than all the other trees, bushes, and plants because she grew taller and straighter than anything else she could see. One day she began boasting to a bramble and said in a very snooty manner, "You poor thing, you are of no use whatsoever. Now look at me. I am useful for lots of things. For instance, when people build houses, they always choose fir. They can't do it without me." The bramble wasn't upset at all. She cleverly replied, "Ah, that's all very well, but you wait until people come with axes to cut you down. Then you'll wish you were a bramble and not a fir. It is sometimes better to be poor without any cares than to be rich and weighted down with duties." The Fly and the Mule. Once upon a time, a mule was plodding slowly down a road, pulling a cart. A tiny fly suddenly appeared and sat on the edge of the cart. "How slow you are," said the fly. "Can't you go faster? I'm in a hurry. Speed up or I will use my stinger as a whip." However, the mule was not in the least bit bothered. "Behind me in the cart," he said, "sits my master. He holds the reins and flicks me with his whip, and I obey him. I'm not going to take any notice of your cheek. I know when I have to go fast and when it's better to go slow." Life is not just about going at top speed. The Fisher and the Little Fish. A fisher had once been fishing all day long and had caught nothing at all. Evening was about to draw in, but there was just time for the fisher to cast his nets one last time before going home. When he drew the nets in, he saw that he had caught something at last. However, it was just a single little fish, which looked up at him and begged for mercy. "Pray, let me go, master," said the fish. I am much too small for you to eat just now. Look at me. I am hardly going to make a bite, let alone a whole meal. If you put me back into the river, I shall soon grow much bigger. Then you can make a splendid banquet of me." But the fisher shook his head. "No, no, my little fish," he said. "I am very lucky to have you now. Another time I may not get you at all." A little thing in the hand is worth more than a great thing that you do not have yet. The mountains in turmoil. Once upon a time, a group of villagers built their homes around the base of some towering mountains. The mountains were like giants, huge and threatening, but the villagers didn't want to move anywhere else because the earth around the mountains was rich and crops grew well. One day, smoke started to pour from the mountain tops, the earth began to quake, and rocks came tumbling down. The people were terrified that the mountains had come to life. They felt sure that something awful was happening. Everyone huddled together, convinced they were going to die. Suddenly the earth shook violently, and a huge gap appeared in the side of the mountains. The people fell to their knees and waited for the end to come. At long last, a teeny-tiny mouse poked its head and whiskers out of the gap and came scampering toward them. And that was the end of it. There is often much fuss about nothing. The Lion and the Mouse. Once, a little mouse came upon a lion who was fast asleep. The mouse had never seen a lion close up before and was very curious to see what his great mane felt like. Very boldly, the mouse crept as nimbly as he could up the lion's leg, along his back, and all the way to his soft, thick mane. However, even though the mouse was being as light and quiet as he could, his movements woke the mighty beast. As the mouse ran back down the lion's leg, an enormous paw clamped down upon his tail. Then the lion snarled and opened his big jaws to swallow him. "Pardon, O king," cried the little mouse, trembling in terror. "Forgive me this time, and I shall never forget it. You never know, I may even be able to return the favor one of these days." At this bold idea, the lion began to laugh. He was so amused at the thought of the mouse being able to help him that he let him go. Some time after, the lion was unlucky enough to be caught in a trap. The rejoicing hunters wanted to carry their prize alive to show their king. So they bound the injured lion and tethered him to a tree while they went in search of a wagon to carry him on. Just then, the little mouse happened to pass by and recognized the lion at once. Seeing his sad plight, the mouse scampered straight up to him. It was only a few moments before he had gnawed away the ropes and the lion was free. "You see," said the little mouse, "was I not right after all?" Little friends may prove great friends. The Eagle and the Beetle. Long ago, an eagle was chasing a hare who was running for her life. She was at her wits' end to know where to turn for help. At last the hare saw a beetle and begged him to help her. Although the beetle was tiny, he swore he would do what he could to help. The hare sank down exhausted, and the eagle swooped in for the kill. But the tiny beetle puffed up his chest and stood tall. He shouted to the eagle not to touch the hare, for she was under his protection. Of course, the eagle never noticed the beetle. He was far too small. So the bird just seized the hare and ate her up. The beetle never forgot this, and from then on he kept an eye on the eagle's nest. Whenever the eagle laid an egg, the beetle climbed up and rolled it out so that it broke. He remained quite unseen by the eagle, who became desperate at the loss of all her eggs. At last, the eagle grew so worried over the loss of her eggs that she went to the great god Jupiter, who was the special protector of eagles. "Please help me, great Jupiter," begged the eagle. "I cannot bear to keep losing my eggs this way. I need a safe place in which to keep them." The god took pity on the eagle and invited her to lay her eggs in his lap. There, he could keep a close eye on them. The beetle had been watching and listening to the eagle's pleas. Immediately he made a ball of dirt the size of an eagle's egg and flew up and placed it in Jupiter's lap. When Jupiter saw the dirt, he stood up to shake it out of his robe, and, forgetting about the eagle's eggs, he shook them out too. The eggs were broken just as before. And ever since then, eagles never lay their eggs in the season when beetles are out and about. The weak can always find ways to avenge insult, even upon the strong. The lion, Jupiter, and the elephant. The lion, for all his size and strength, and his sharp teeth and claws, is a coward in one way. He can't bear the sound of a cockerel crowing, and he runs away whenever he hears it. Once, the lion complained bitterly to the great god Jupiter for making him like that. But Jupiter said it wasn't his fault, and he had done the best he could for him. Jupiter also said that, considering this was the lion's only weakness, he ought to be content. The lion, however, wouldn't be comforted, and was so ashamed of his timidity that he prowled around with a heavy heart. One day the lion met the elephant, and the two got talking in friendly conversation. The lion noticed that the great beast cocked up his ears all the time, as if he were listening for something, and the lion couldn't resist asking why he did so. Just then a tiny gnat came humming by, and the elephant said, "Do you see that wretched little buzzing insect? I'm terribly afraid that it will get into my ear. If it gets in, I'm done for. That's why I keep flapping my ears, to keep the little gnat out of them." The lion's spirits rose at once when he heard this. For, he said to himself, if the elephant, huge as he is afraid of a gnat, I needn't be so much ashamed of being afraid of a cockerel, which is 10,000 times bigger than a gnat. There is no shame in being afraid, no matter how big you are. The Gnat and the Lion. There was once a tiny gnat who had no fear. He went striding up to a lion who could barely see him and said, "I am not in the least bit afraid of you. What does your strength amount to after all? I'm stronger than you. If you don't believe it, let us fight and see." With that, the gnat sounded his battle horn, darted in, and bit the lion's nose. When the lion felt the sting, he was furious. However, in his haste to swat the gnat, he only succeeded in scratching his nose and making it bleed. He failed altogether to hurt the gnat, which buzzed off in triumph, overjoyed. The gnat's celebrations were short-lived, however. It flew straight into a spider's web and was caught and eaten by the spider. And so the gnat fell prey to an insignificant creature after having triumphed over the king of the beasts. No one is so great that they cannot fail. The Mouse and the Bull. There was once a bull who was feeding on a bale of straw. He had no idea that a mouse was living there. The mouse was angry that the bull was about to destroy his home. As the bull lowered his head to eat, the tiny mouse hit the great animal on the nose. Cheekily, the mouse then disappeared into a hole in the wall. Despite the surprise, the bull charged at the wall, butting it with his huge head, but the wall held firm. After a while, the bull became tired and sank to the ground. Then, when all was quiet, the mouse ran out and bit him again. The bull was beside himself. He rose to his feet, but the mouse ran back in the hole again, and the bull could do nothing but bellow and fume. Then he heard a shrill voice say, "You big fellows don't always have it your way. Sometimes we little ones come off best." The battle is not always won by the strong. The Goose That Laid the Golden Egg and Other Fables, compiled by Vic Parker. The Stag and the Vine. A stag was once running for his life from some huntsmen. He plunged into a field and, feeling his limbs growing tired, looked desperately for somewhere to hide. He saw a thick vine growing nearby and raced behind it to take cover. Trying to calm his labored breathing, he stood stone still as the huntsman raced past his hiding place, with no idea that the stag was there. The stag waited for a while. Then, supposing all danger to be over, he began to munch on the leaves of the vine for refreshment. Little did he know that the huntsmen were not as far away as he thought. One keen-eyed hunter noticed the leaves of the vine moving, although there was no wind. He realized that an animal was hidden there and shot an arrow into the foliage. The stag was pierced in the heart, and as he died, he said, "I deserve my fate for feeding upon the leaves of my protector." Ungratefulness sometimes brings its own punishment. The Two Neighbors. Long, long ago, in the early days of the world, two neighbors prayed to the great god Zeus, who ruled over earth. The neighbors presented gifts and bowed low to the ground. Then they begged Zeus, who was all-knowing and all-powerful, to grant them their heart's desires. Zeus looked deep inside them and saw that one of the neighbors burned with a terrible greed for money or avarice, which could never be fulfilled. And Zeus saw that the heart of the other neighbor was on fire with envy. So to teach them both a lesson, the wise god decided that he would grant each man whatever he wished for himself, but on one condition. The other neighbor would get twice as much. After the two neighbors had prayed, they began to wish for their heart's desires, to see if Zeus had heard and answered them. The first neighbor shut himself inside his house and wished for a room filled with gold. Imagine his astonishment when it appeared before him. But his delight was short-lived, for a few minutes later his neighbor came running to his door to tell him that 2 rooms of gold had appeared in his house. Of course, this man quickly became unhappy too. Instead of being pleased that he had double the treasure, he was envious that his neighbor had been answered by Zeus and had any treasure at all. He instantly found himself wishing that his greedy neighbor might lose one of his eyes. Of course, it was no sooner said than done, but he himself lost both and became totally blind. Vices are their own punishment. The Hare and the Tortoise. A hare was once boasting to the other animals about how speedy he was. "No one is faster than me," he said with a smirk. "I challenge anyone to prove me wrong. Who is bold enough to race with me?" Of course, no one dared put themselves forward, until a tortoise slowly lifted his head and spoke. "I accept your challenge," the old wrinkled one announced softly. The hare burst out laughing. "Oh, that is funny. Please tell me you are joking." But the tortoise was deadly serious. "Save your boasting until you've beaten me," he said. The other animals, astonished, rushed to set a course. It took the tortoise several minutes to amble to the start line. Some of the animals muttered to each other and shook their heads. "Ready, set, go!" bellowed the ox, and finally the race began. The hare darted out of sight. But as soon as he had rounded the bend, he thought he'd have a laugh at the tortoise's expense. He lay down under a tree and pretended to nap, just to show that he could even stop to sleep and still beat the tortoise. But in the peaceful coolness, the hare really did fall fast asleep. Slowly, slowly the tortoise plodded on, past the sleeping hare, until the finish line was in sight. All at once, the hare woke with a start, horrified. He bounded away, but the tortoise passed the finish line before he could catch up. Slow and steady wins the race. The Serpent and the File. One hot day, a snake was slithering along, going nowhere in particular, when it glided into the workshop of a craftsman who made armor. The workshop was cool and shady, and the snake slid further in, looking for a safe corner in which to curl up and rest. As it slithered over the floor, it suddenly felt its skin scratched by a rough tool called a file, which the workman had left lying on the ground. In a rage, the snake turned on it and tried to pierce the iron file with its fangs, but all it succeeded in doing was hurting its mouth. It is a waste of time to get angry about unfeeling things. The Goose that Laid the Golden Egg. Once upon a time there lived a farmer who owned a prize goose. The goose laid an egg every day, which was always big and tasty. Once, when the farmer went to check the nest, he was surprised to find that the egg looked strange. It was yellow and shiny. When he picked it up, it was as heavy as lead. The farmer's first thought was that an envious neighbor must have played a trick on him. But just before he threw the egg away, he thought better of it and took it home instead. There he examined it closely, and to his surprise, he found that the egg was made of pure gold. To the farmer's amazement, the next day the goose laid another golden egg, and the next day, and the next. He soon became wealthy from selling them. However, as he grew richer, he became greedier. One day he decided he had to have all the gold the goose must have inside her. So he killed her and opened her up, only to find nothing. Greedy people who try to take too much will often run out of luck. The Mischievous Dog. A man once had a dog that was a faithful, loyal companion to him. However, whenever visitors came to the man's house, the dog would bark and snap at them for no reason. The man, of course, found this a great nuisance, not to mention a danger. So he fastened a bell around the dog's neck. This way, as people approached his house, they would hear the dog coming and be warned to stay back. The dog was very proud of the bell. He strutted about, tinkling it with great satisfaction, showing it off as if it were a medal. One day an old dog came up to him and said, "The fewer airs you give yourself, the better, my friend. You don't think, do you, that your bell was given as a reward of merit? On the contrary, it is a badge of disgrace." Notoriety is often mistaken for fame. The Miser and His Gold. Once upon a time there lived a miserly man whose greatest pleasure in life was to save his money and count it. Each day he would lock the door to his house, draw the blinds, and fetch the chest of gold coins from under his bed. His eyes would glint and gleam as he placed the money into piles and counted up the total. One day, as the man was counting the coins, an awful thought took hold of him. What if someone broke into his house one day while he was at market? They would surely look under the bed and find his treasure. But the old miser could not think of a better hiding place. Then an idea came to him. "I know," he said to himself. If there is not a better hiding place inside the house, perhaps outside the house would be safer. That night, under cover of darkness, the man crept into his garden with a big spade. At the foot of the biggest tree, he dug a deep hole, in which he placed his chest of gold. He covered the chest over with earth. Then he crept back inside, rubbing his hands with glee. From then on, every night the man would steal into his garden and dig up the chest. He would delight in counting the coins, then bury his treasure in the hole once more. The man thought he had been so clever, no one would come across it there. However, little did the man know that on one particular night a robber was hiding in the tree. He saw everything, and of course, as soon as the miser had returned inside his house, the robber came down from the tree, dug up the treasure, and ran off with it. The next night, when the man came outside to gloat over his treasure, he was horrified to find nothing but the empty hole. He wailed and wept and tore at his hair, and raised such an outcry that all his neighbors came running to see what had happened. Then the man owned up and told them about how he used to come and check on his gold. "Did you ever spend any of it?" asked one neighbor. "No," said the man. "I only counted it." "Then come again and look at the hole," said a neighbor. "It will do you just as much good. If you don't use wealth and treasures, they may as well not exist." The Olive Tree and the Fig Tree. High on a hillside in a sunny country, an olive tree lived next to a fig tree. They had been neighbors for a long time, putting forth harvest after harvest of fruit. As the two stood surveying the landscape before them, they would chat. From time to time, they would tease each other. One day the olive tree taunted the fig tree about how she lost her leaves every autumn. "You lose your leaves each year when the weather turns colder, and you stay bare until the spring. Whereas I, as you see, stay green all year round. For, of course, olive trees are evergreen." It wasn't long after that the frosts of winter came. The weather was harsh, and there was a heavy fall of snow. The snow settled on the tiny leaves of the olive tree like a thick blanket. She was so bowed down with the weight that her branches bent and broke. But the snowflakes fell harmlessly through the bare branches of the fig, which survived for many more harvests. People who boast about their wealth or their fortune can meet with unexpected disaster. Mercury and the Woodman. Long, long ago, in the early days of the world, the messenger god Mercury was walking through a forest when he heard someone groaning and moaning nearby. He hurried through the trees and found that the voice belonged to a woodman. The woodman had been felling a tree on the river bank when his axe had bounced off the trunk, flown out of his hands, and fallen into the water. Now he stood by the water's edge, lamenting his loss. Mercury felt very sorry for the woodman. How would he make a living without the tool of his trade? To the woodman's huge surprise, the god suddenly dived into the river. No sooner had Mercury plunged into the water than he reappeared, holding a golden axe. "Is this what you lost?" he asked the woodman. The woodman was of course tempted for a moment to reply that the amazing axe was his. But being an honest fellow, he sighed and did not. Then Mercury dived a second time and brought up a silver axe and asked if it was the woodman's. "No, that is not mine either," said the woodman with another deep sigh. Once more, Mercury dived into the river, and this time he brought up the woodman's missing axe. The woodman was overjoyed at recovering his property, and thanked the god heartily. In turn, Mercury was so pleased with the woodman's honesty that he made him a present of the other two axes. The woodman couldn't believe it. He hurried home and told the story to his friends, who were of course filled with envy. One of them was so jealous that he was determined to try his luck for himself. The man went to the edge of the river and began to fell a tree, and presently let his axe drop into the water. Mercury appeared as before, and on learning that the axe had fallen in, he dived and again brought up a golden axe. Without waiting to be asked if it was his or not, the man cried, "That's mine! That's mine!" and stretched out his hand eagerly for the prize. But Mercury was so disgusted at his dishonesty that he not only took away the golden axe, he also refused to recover the one that had fallen into the river. Honesty is the best policy. The Boy and the Filberts. There was once a little boy who noticed a jar of nuts or filberts on a shelf. They looked so tasty that he couldn't resist reaching up and lifting them down. He took off the lid, thrust his hand inside the jar, and greedily grasped as many as he could hold. But when he tried to pull his hand out again, he found he couldn't, for the neck of the jar was too small to allow such a large handful to get through. The little boy didn't want to let go of all his tasty treats, but unless he did, he couldn't get his hand out. The little boy burst into tears. Just then a neighbor was passing by the window and saw what the trouble was. "There, there," she said. "Come, my boy, don't be so greedy. If you let go of some of the nuts and be content with just half of what you have, you'll be able to get your hand out easily enough. Do not attempt too much at once." The Travelers and the Plane Tree. Two travelers were walking along a dusty road on a hot summer's day. They were relieved when they came across a broad plane tree and turned off the road to shelter from the sun in the deep shade of its branches. They sank down and cooled off, and then got out some food to eat. As the travelers rested, refreshed, they looked up into the tree, and one of them remarked to his companion, "What a useless tree the plane is! It bears no fruit and is of no service to man at all." Then the plane tree interrupted him with great indignation. "You ungrateful creature!" it cried. "You come and take shelter beneath me from the scorching sun, and then, in the very act of enjoying the cool shade I provide, you claim I am good for nothing? Many a service is met with ingratitude." The Sick Stag. A mighty stag was once the lord of the forest, held in awe and respected by all the other creatures that lived there. However, there came a time when the stag fell ill. He became so sick that he collapsed in a shady clearing, too weak to move from the spot. The birds flying overhead soon saw what had happened and talked about it in sadness. Soon other creatures heard too, and as the news of the stag's illness spread, many of the other forest beasts came to see how he was. However, as they came, they all nibbled a little of the grass that grew around the stag, until there was not a blade within his reach. After a few days, the stag felt better, but by then he was too weak to go in search of food, and so it was that he died of hunger due to the thoughtlessness of his friends. Bad friends can do you more harm than good. The Thief and the Innkeeper. Once upon a time, a thief rented a room at an inn and stayed there several days on the lookout for something to steal. However, no opportunity presented itself until one day when the innkeeper appeared in a fine new coat. The thief no sooner set eyes upon the coat than he longed to get his hands on it, so he took a seat in the garden by the innkeeper's side. They chatted amiably for some time. Then the thief suddenly yawned and howled like a wolf.
The innkeeper was shocked and concerned, and asked the thief what the matter was. The thief replied, "I will tell you about myself, sir, but first I must beg you to take charge of my clothes for me, for I intend to leave them with you. Why I have these fits of yawning I cannot tell. Maybe they are sent as a punishment for things I have done wrong. But the facts are that when I have yawned 3 times, I become a raging wolf and fly at men's throats." As he finished speaking, he yawned a second time and howled again as before. The innkeeper, believing every word and terrified at the prospect of being confronted with a wolf, started to run indoors. But the thief caught him by the coat, crying, "Stay, sir, and take charge of my clothes, or I shall never see them again." As the thief spoke, he opened his mouth and began to yawn for the 3rd time.
The innkeeper, mad with fear, slipped out of his coat, which remained in the other's hands, and bolted inside. The thief then stole off with his spoil. Don't always believe everything people say. The Thrush and the Fowler. A hungry thrush once came across a myrtle bush covered in bright, juicy berries. She happily flew down and began to eat, hardly able to believe her luck. The little bird ate berry after berry until she was quite full, but she couldn't stop because the berries were so delicious. The thrush was so busy plucking off the berries that she didn't notice a bird catcher, or fowler, approaching. He spotted the plump little bird at once, and his eyes sparkled. Quickly and quietly he took out some long reeds he had brought with him and spread them with sticky bird lime. Then, still unnoticed, he poked the reeds into the myrtle bush. Of course, it was only a matter of time before the thrush hopped onto one of the sticky reeds, and she was caught fast. Immediately the thrush realized she was about to be killed. "How foolish I am!" cried the thrush pitifully, as the bird-catcher approached. "For the sake of a little pleasant food, I have given up my life." A moment's pleasure can bring a lifetime's misery. The 4 Princesses and Other Poems, compiled by Tig Thomas. The music of your voice. A vase upon the mantelpiece, a ship upon the sea, a goat upon a mountain top are much the same to me. But when you mention melon jam, or picnics by the creek, or apple pies, or pantomimes, I love to hear you speak. The date of Magna Carta, or the doings of the Dutch, or capes, or towns, or verbs, or nouns, do not excite me much. But when you mention moto rides, down by the sea for choice, or chasing games, or chocolates, I love to hear your voice. A witch's spell. Fillet of a fenny snake, in the cauldron boil and bake. Eye of newt, toe of frog, wool of bat, and tongue of dog. Adder's fork and blind worm's sting, lizard's leg and howlet's wing. For a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth boil and bubble. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Cool it with a baboon's blood, now the spell is thick and good. An elf singing. An elf sat on a twig. He was not very big. He sang a little song. He did not think it wrong. But he was on a wizard's ground, who hated all sweet sound. Elf, elf, take care of yourself. He's coming behind you, to seize you and bind you, and stifle your song. The wizard, the wizard! He changes his shape, in crawling along an ugly old ape, a poisonous lizard, a spotted spider, a wormy glider. The wizard, the wizard! He's up on the bough, He'll bite through your gizzard. He's close to you now." The elf went on with his song. It grew more clear and strong. It lifted him in the air. He floated singing away, with rainbows in his hair, while the wizard worm from his creep made a sudden leap, fell down into a hole, and ere his magic word he could say, was eaten up by a mole. There were three sisters. There were three sisters, fair and bright, Jennifer, Gentle, and Rosemary, and they three loved one valiant knight, as the dew flies over the mulberry tree. The eldest sister let him in, Jennifer, Gentle, and Rosemary, and barred the door with a silver pin, as the dew flies over the mulberry tree. The second sister made his bed, Jennifer, Gentle, and Rosemary, and placed soft pillows under his head, as the dew flies over the mulberry tree. The youngest sister, fair and bright, Jennifer, Gentle, and Rosemary, was resolved for to wed with this valiant knight, as the dew flies over the mulberry tree. And if you can answer questions 3, Jennifer, Gentle, and Rosemary, oh then, fair maid, I will marry with thee, as the dew flies over the mulberry tree. What is louder than a horn, Jennifer, Gentle, and Rosemary? And what is sharper than a thorn, as the dew flies over the mulberry tree? Thunder is louder than a horn, Jennifer, Gentle, and Rosemary, and hunger is sharper than a thorn, as the dew flies over the mulberry tree. What is broader than the way, Jennifer, Gentle, and Rosemary? What is deeper than the sea, as the dew flies over the mulberry tree? Love is broader than the way, Jennifer, Gentle, and Rosemary, and hell is deeper than the sea, as the dew flies over the mulberry tree. And now, fair maid, I will marry thee. Boy dreams. I was a pirate once, a blustering fellow with scarlet sash, a ready cutlass and language rash. From a ship with a rum-filled water tank, I made the enemy walk the plank. I marooned a man on an island bare, and seized his wife by her long dark hair. Took treasure, such heaps of it, wealth untold, bright bars of silver and chunks of gold, till my ship was choked to the decks with pelf, and no one dare touch it except myself. And my black flag waved to the tearing breeze, and I was the terror of all the seas. I was a fairy once. I swung in the boughs of the silky oak, and the harebells rang to the words I spoke. And my wings were fashioned of silver gauze, and I knew no grief and no human laws. And I lived where the laces of green leaves sway, and my life was one long, long holiday. No tasks to learn and no bothering rules, no hectoring grown-ups and no more schools, but a dance each eve 'neath the moon's cold light, to sit up as late as I liked at night. For a lance I carried a grass blade green, and my shield was cut from an olive vine. I sipped cool dews from the cups of flowers. My days were threaded of happy hours.
I was a merman once, in the gloom of the amber-tinted seas, with the brown tang clinging about my knees, with a coral house and a crab to ride, who pranced and who ambled from side to side. I wooed a mermaid with emerald hair, dragged the fierce sea serpent from out his lair, with his flaming tongue and his awful might, and I slew him easy in open fight. I had strings of pearls white as frozen milk, that were strung for me on sea spiders' silk, and I never pined for the upper skies, whose blue came down in the dead men's eyes, Drowned men with the salt on their blackened lips, who slid drifting in from the wrecks of ships. But I took the gold from the belts of all to pave the road to my coral hall.
I was a hunter once, and I trapped and stalked in a pathless wood, and the talk of the wild things understood. With my leather leggings and hat of brown, I tracked the elk and the redskin down, slew a grizzly bear in a mountain cave, and tweaked the nose of an Indian brave. Ere I shot the rapids in birch canoe, for there was nothing I could not do. There was naught I did not dare or enjoy in the magic world of a dreaming boy. The Four Princesses. 4 princesses lived in a green tower, a bright green tower in the middle of the sea. And no one could think, oh, no one could think, who the 4 princesses could be. One looked to the north, and one to the south, and one to the east, and one to the west. They were all so pretty, so very pretty, you could not tell which was the prettiest. Their curls were golden, their eyes were blue, and their voices were sweet as a silvery bell. And 4 white birds around them flew, but where they came from, who could tell? Oh, who could tell, for no one knew, and not a word could you hear them say, but the sound of their singing, like church bells ringing, would sweetly float as they passed away. For under the sun and under the stars, they often sailed on the distant sea. Then in their green tower and roses bower, they lived again, a mystery. Oh dear, what can the matter be? Dear, dear, what can the matter be? Oh dear, what can the matter be? Johnny's so long at the fair. He promised he'd buy me a fairing should please me, and then for a kiss, oh, he vowed he would tease me. He promised he'd bring me a bunch of blue ribbons to tie up my bonny brown hair. And it's oh dear, what can the matter be? Dear, dear, what can the matter be? Oh dear, what can the matter be? Johnny's so long at the fair. He promised he'd bring me a basket of posies, a garland of lilies, a garland of roses, a little straw hat to set off the blue ribbons that tie up my bonny brown hair. And it's oh dear, what can the matter be? Dear, dear, what can the matter be? Oh dear, what can the matter be? Johnny's so long at the fair.
Winkin', blinkin', and nod. Winkin', blinkin', and nod one night sailed off in a wooden shoe, sailed on river of crystal light into a sea of dew. "Where are you going, and what do you wish?" the old moon asked the 3. "We have come to fish for the herring fish that live in this beautiful sea." "Nets of silver and gold have we," said Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. The old moon laughed and sang a song as they rocked in a wooden shoe, and the wind that sped them all night long ruffled the waves of dew. The little stars were the herring fish that lived in that beautiful sea. "Now cast your nets wherever you wish, but never afeard are we." So cried the stars to the fishermen 3, Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. All night long their nets they threw to the stars in the twinkling foam. Then down from the skies came the wooden shoe, bringing the fishermen home. 'Twas all so pretty a sail it seemed, as if it could not be, and some folks thought 'twas a dream they'd dreamed of sailing that beautiful sea. But I shall name you the fishermen 3, Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. Winkin' and Blinkin' are 2 little eyes, and Nod is a little head. And the wooden shoe that sailed the skies is a wee one's trundle bed. So shut your eyes while Mother sings of wonderful sights that be,
and you shall see the beautiful things as you rock on the misty sea, where the old shoe rocked the fishermen three, Wynken, Blynken, and Nod. Ariel's song from the Tempest. Where the bee sucks, there suck I, in the cowslip's bell I lie. There I couch when owls do cry, on the bat's back I do fly. After summer merrily, merrily, merrily shall I live now, under the blossom that hangs on the bough. Queen Mab. A little fairy comes at night. Her eyes are blue, her hair is brown, with silver spots upon her wings, and from the moon she flutters down. She has a little silver wand, and when a good child goes to bed, she waves her wand from right to left and makes a circle round its head. And then it dreams of pleasant things, of fountains filled with fairy fish, and trees that bear delicious fruit and bow their branches at a wish. Of arbors filled with dainty scents, from lovely flowers that never fade, bright flies that glitter in the sun, and glowworms shining in the shade, and talking birds with gifted tongues for singing songs and telling tales, and pretty dwarfs to show the way through fairy hills and fairy dales. But when a bad child goes to bed, from left to right she weaves her rings, and then it dreams all through the night of only ugly, horrid things. Then lions come with glaring eyes, and tigers growl a dreadful noise, and ogres draw their cruel knives to shed the blood of girls and boys. Then stormy waves rush on to drown, or raging flames come scorching round. Fierce dragons hover in the air, and serpents crawl along the ground. Then wicked children wake and weep, and wish the long black gloom away. But good ones love the dark, and find the night as pleasant as the day. A daring prince. A daring prince of the realm Rangdoon once went up in a big balloon that caught and stuck on the horns of the moon, and he hung up there till next day noon, when all at once he exclaimed, "Hoot toot!" and then came down in his parachute. Climbing. High up in the apple tree climbing I go, with the sky above me, the earth below. Each branch is the step of a wonderful stair, which leads to the town I see shining up there. Climbing, climbing, higher and higher, the branches blow and I see a spire, the gleam of a turret, the glint of a dome, all sparkling and bright like white sea foam. On and on from bough to bough, the leaves are thick, but I push my way through. Before I have always had to stop, but today I am sure I shall reach the top. Today to the end of the marvelous stair, where those glittering pinnacles flash in the air. Climbing, climbing, higher I go, with the sky close above me, the earth far below. Terence McDiddler. Terence McDiddler, the three-stringed fiddler, can charm, if you please, the fish from the seas. A fairy in armor. He put his acorn helmet on. It was plumed of the silk of the thistledown. The corset plate that guarded his breast was once the wild bee's golden vest. His cloak of 1,000 mingled dyes was formed of the wings of butterflies. His shield was the shell of a ladybird green, studs of gold on a ground of green, and the quivering lance which he brandished bright was the sting of a wasp he had slain in fight. Swift he bestrode his firefly steed, he bared his blade of the bent grass, he drove his spurs of the cockle seed, and away like a glance of thought he flew, to skim the heavens and follow far the fiery trail of the rocket star. A big shoe. said little Sue to little Pete. "I can't see you for your big feet," said little Pete to little Sue. "'Tis not my feet, 'tis but my shoe." Seashell. Seashell, seashell, sing me a song, oh please, a song of ships and sailor men and parrots and tropical trees, of islands lost in the Spanish Main which no man ever may find again, of fishes and corals under the waves and seahorses stabled in great green caves. Seashell, seashell, sing of the things you know so well. From the Gypsies. The fairy beam upon you, the stars to glisten on you, a moon of light in the noon of night, till the fire drake hath o'ergone you. The wheel of fortune guide you, the boy with the bow beside you. Run I in the way till the bird of day and the luckier lot betide you. The Wolf and His Shadow and Other Fables, compiled by Vic Parker. The Swan and the Goose. There was once a rich man who wanted to show off to his neighbors. He went to market and bought a goose and a swan. He fed the goose well, making sure it grew plump, ready to be cooked for a feast one day. However, he planned to keep the swan so he could hear its beautiful song from his window. The time finally arrived for the man to hold his feast. His cook and kitchen assistants worked hard in preparation to make many delicious dishes. Then they had to kill the goose ready for cooking. So that night, the cook went out to catch it. He could hardly see his hand in front of his face, let alone tell one bird from the other. By mistake, he caught the swan instead of the goose. The swan, knowing it was about to be killed, burst into one last beautiful song. The cook realized that he had the wrong bird, and so the swan was saved by its singing. Sweet words may save us from danger when harsh words fail. The Frog Who Wanted a King. Once upon a time there was a group of frogs who lived as happily as could be in a marshy swamp. Not many animals would enjoy the boggy conditions, but it suited the frogs. Every day they went splashing about through the puddles, without a care in the world. No one came near the slimy, grimy waters, so no one troubled them. But some of the frogs thought that this happy-go-lucky life was not right, that they should have a king and proper rules. So the frogs prayed to the great god Zeus, who ruled over the earth, to give them what they wanted. "Mighty Zeus," they cried, "please send us a king who will rule and keep us in order." High up on Mount Olympus, where the gods and goddesses lived, Zeus laughed at the noisy croaking of the frogs. A king? He thought. What would those silly creatures do with a king? Instead, he threw down into the swamp a huge log, which landed with a splash in the water. The frogs were frightened out of their lives. They all rushed to the bank to see whatever had fallen from the sky. At first, they thought it must be a horrible monster. But after a time, seeing that it did not move, one or two of the boldest frogs ventured out towards the log and even dared to touch it. Still, it did not move. Then the bravest of the frogs jumped upon the log and began dancing up and down on it. All the other frogs soon came and did the same. After that, they lost interest in the log. For some time they went about their business without taking any notice of the log lying in their midst. But they still wanted a king, so they prayed to Zeus again and said to him, "Please send us a king, not just a log, but a real king who will really rule over us." This irritated Zeus. "How ungrateful and foolish they are," he thought. So he sent a big stork that set to work gobbling up all the frogs. Then they wished they had never asked for a king in the first place, but it was too late. Better no rule than cruel rule. The Two Fellows and the Bear. Once upon a time, two men were traveling through a wood together, chatting about this and that to pass the time. All at once, a huge bear rushed out at them. The travelers were of course terrified. One ran for his life. He dashed into a thicket of trees, seized hold of the low-hanging branches, and gathered them around to hide himself. The other traveler threw himself to the ground, face down in the dust. He kept still, not even daring to breathe. The bear came up to him, sniffing him all over. But at last, with a growl, it slouched off. It thought the man must be dead, and bears do not like dead meat. Then, when the man in the trees saw that the bear had gone, he came out and returned to his traveling companion. Laughing, he said, "What was it that the bear whispered to you?" "It told me," said the other, "a friend who runs off and leaves you at the first sign of trouble should not be trusted. Never trust a friend who deserts you at a pinch." The Workman and the Nightingale. It was a hot summer's night, so hot that a workman could not get to sleep. Instead, he lay with the window open, listening to the beautiful song of a nightingale, hoping that a little breeze might blow through. The little bird kept him company all night long, singing sweetly. The workman listened intently, and he was so delighted by its singing that he decided he had to have the bird for himself. The next night, the workman set a trap for the nightingale and captured it. "Now that I have caught you," he cried, "you will always sing to me whenever I want." But the little bird held its chin high and proud and shook its head. "We nightingales never sing in a cage," it said. "Then I will eat you," said the workman. "I have always heard that a nightingale on toast is a tasty snack." The nightingale quivered in terror. "No, please don't eat me," it begged. "Let me go free, and I will tell you 3 things that are worth far more than my little body." The workman thought for a moment, but he didn't see how he could lose. "All right," he shrugged, and he set the bird free. Without a moment's hesitation, the nightingale flew up to the highest branch of a nearby tree and looked down at the workman way out of reach below. "The 3 things are pieces of advice," it trilled. "Firstly, never believe a captive's promise. Secondly, keep what you have. And thirdly, don't feel sad for what you have lost forever and cannot get back." Then, while the workman was wondering how he could have been tricked by a tiny bird, the nightingale flew away. Do not feel sorry about what is lost forever. The Hare with Many Friends. There was once a hare who was popular with the other animals. She was good-natured and fun to be with. Everyone claimed to be her friend. But one day, she heard the sound of thundering hooves and baying hounds. Huntsmen were approaching with sniffer dogs. The hare knew they were after her. What if she could outrun them? She thought her friends might be able to help her escape instead. So the hare ran off to see the horse and asked him to carry her away from the hounds on his back. But he refused, stating that he had work to do for his master. "I'm sure," he said, "that the bull would be happy to help you." So the hare dashed off to ask the bull, hoping that he would charge at the hounds with his horns. But the bull replied, "I am very sorry, but I have an appointment. However, I feel sure that the goat will do as you ask." The hare sped off to see the goat. However, he feared that his back might be too bumpy for the hare. "I don't want to hurt you," he explained. "Why don't you ask the ram? His back is woolly and soft." So the hare hurried to see the ram and told him about the hunters. The ram replied, "My friend, I do not like to interfere, as hounds have been known to eat sheep as well as hares." The hare was growing desperate. The sound of the hunt was getting ever closer. She sprinted off to see the calf, as a very last hope. However, the calf said that he too was unable to help. He did not like to take the responsibility, as so many adults had declined the task. By this time, the hounds were very near. There was nothing left for the hare to do but run for her life. And luckily, she escaped. She that has many friends has no friends. The Wolf and His Shadow. There was once a big hairy wolf who was roaming across a plain at the end of a day's hunting. The sun was low in the sky, and the wolf noticed that his shadow was enormous. "I knew I was big, but I didn't realize I was that big," said the wolf to himself. "Why, I am a very fine creature indeed. Everyone should be afraid of me, and I should be afraid of no one. Fancy me bowing down to a lion. I ought to be king of the beasts." Not caring about any danger, the wolf began strutting along as if he was the finest animal on earth. But just then a lion pounced upon him, seized him in his jaws, and began to eat him. "Alas!" the wolf cried, "had I not lost sight of the facts, I shouldn't have been ruined by my fancies." Be realistic about your own potential. The Bat and the Weasels. A bat once lived with his fellow bats in a deep, dark cave. They lived happily, flying out to hunt at night and returning to sleep during the day. However, one evening, the bat flew into a tree and fell to the ground. Unfortunately, a weasel sniffed him out. Before the bat could fly away, the weasel had pounced and caught him. The bat begged to be let go. The weasel said he couldn't do that because he was an enemy of birds. "I'm not a bird, I'm a mouse," said the bat. The weasel looked at the bat. "So you are," he said, "now that I look at you," and he let the bat go. Soon after, the bat was caught in the same way by another weasel, and begged for his life. "No," said the weasel, "I never let a mouse go." "I'm not a mouse," said the bat, "I'm a bird." The weasel examined the bat. "So you are," he said, and he too let the bat go. Look and see which way the wind blows before you commit yourself. The Trumpeter Taken Prisoner. Once, during a time of war, there was a brave army trumpeter who went too close to the enemy on the battlefield. Enemy soldiers captured him and dragged him back behind their lines, delighted that he could no longer sound out the other side's orders. The soldiers were about to put him to death when the young trumpeter begged for mercy. "Look at me. I am not a fighter," he said. "I don't even carry a weapon. All I do is blow this trumpet, and how can that hurt you? So I ask you, why do you want to kill me? Please spare my life. I have done nothing to you." But the enemy soldiers answered grimly, "You may not have had a hand in the fighting against us, but by sounding out the orders, you guide and encourage your soldiers in battle. They and you have killed hundreds of our men, so now you must pay the price for your music. Those who stir up trouble are as guilty as those who carry it out." The Tunnyfish and the Dolphin. Once upon a time in the ocean, far out in deep water, a dolphin was chasing a tunnyfish. They both splashed through the water at a great rate, swimming with all their might, and gradually the dolphin began gaining on the tunnyfish. Just as the dolphin was about to seize him, the tunnyfish gave a huge leap that carried him right out of the water and onto a sandbank. In the heat of the chase, the dolphin followed him, and there they both lay out of the water, gasping for dear life. When the tunnyfish saw that his enemy was doomed like himself, he said, "I don't mind having to die now, for I see that the cause of my death is about to share the same fate. If you seek to harm someone, they will get great satisfaction in seeing you come to harm too. The Beekeeper. There was once a beekeeper who had many hives full of honey. A thief had his eye on them and was determined to steal the honey for himself. He waited until the beekeeper went out one day, then broke in and stole every last morsel from the hives. When the beekeeper returned and found the hives empty, he was very upset. It wasn't long before the bees came back from gathering nectar and finding their hives overturned, and the keeper standing by, they thought it was he who had taken all their honey. In their rage, they stung the beekeeper, swarming over him. At this, the beekeeper was furious and cried, "You ungrateful scoundrels! You let the thief who stole my honey get away with it, and then you sting me, the person who has always taken such care of you. If you hit back, make sure you have the right person." The Apes and the Two Travelers. Once upon a time, two men were traveling on a journey together. One of the men always spoke the truth, but the other never said anything but lies. After some time, they came to a land of apes. The travelers were very surprised when a band of apes seized them and dragged them off to see their king. The king ape had demanded that they be captured because he wanted to know what humans said about him and his subjects. The travelers were taken into the king's throne room. The king had commanded that all the apes be present to hear what humans said about them. The king sat on a throne, because that was what human kings did, and arranged his subjects in rows. When the men were dragged in, the king asked, "What sort of a king do I seem to be to you, O strangers?" The lying traveler replied, "You seem to me a most mighty king." "And what is your opinion of those you see around me?" the king ape asked. "These," the lying traveler answered, "are worthy companions of yours, fit at least to be ambassadors and leaders of armies." The ape and all his court were pleased with the lies. They commanded that a handsome present be given to the flatterer. On this, the truthful traveler thought to himself, "If so great a reward be given for a lie, how may I be treated if, according to my custom, I tell the truth?" The king ape turned to the truthful traveler. "And how do I and my friends seem to you?" he demanded. "You are," the truthful traveler answered, "a most excellent ape, and all of your companions who are copying you are all excellent apes too." The king ape, enraged at this, threw the traveler to his furious fellow apes. Don't always assume that the values of others match your own. The Flea and the Man. There was once a tiny flea that bit a man again and again. It would not give up. The man suffered it for a long time, but finally he could take no more. He looked everywhere on himself until he found the flea, and at last succeeded in catching it. Holding it between his finger and thumb, he said, "Who are you, wretched little creature, that you dare to cause me such misery?" Now, the flea was not so bold. It whimpered in a weak little voice, "Oh, sir, I beg of you, let me go, don't kill me. I am such a little thing that I can't do you much harm." But the man said, "I am going to kill you at once. Whatever is bad has got to be destroyed. It doesn't matter how little harm it may cause. Do not waste your pity on a scamp." The Stag in the Ox. There was once a stag who lived in a forest. His home was in some high crags amongst the trees, where he felt quite safe. But one day, to his horror, he heard hounds approaching. He was forced to flee as the hounds chased him through the forest and out towards a nearby village. The desperate stag galloped into a farmyard and dashed into a stable where a number of oxen were gathered. He looked around in terror for a hiding place, and in the end buried himself under a pile of hay in an empty stall. He lay there, as still and silent as he could, hidden except for the very tips of his antlers. After a few minutes, one of the oxen looked at the heap of hay and said, "Whatever made you come in here? The huntsmen who are after you may not find you, but you are running the risk of being captured by the cattle herders." Then the stag replied, "Please let me stay for now. When night comes, I shall easily escape under cover of darkness." So the oxen went back to minding their own business and left the stag to hide. That afternoon, several farmhands came to tend the oxen, but none noticed the stag. He began to relax, congratulating himself on his escape, and he thanked the oxen for letting him stay.
"We wish you well," said one oxen, "but you are not out of danger yet. If the master comes, you will certainly be found, for nothing ever escapes his keen eyes." Sure enough, in came the master and made a great to-do about the way the oxen were kept. "The beasts are starving," he cried. "Here, give them more hay." As he spoke, he seized an armful himself from the pile where the stag lay hidden, and at once found him. Calling his men, he caught and killed the stag, ready for eating. There is no eye like the master's. The farmer, his boy, and the rooks. A farmer once sowed a field of wheat. He kept watch over it, for lots of rooks kept settling and eating the grain. With him went his boy, carrying a slingshot, so the farmer could scare the birds away. But whenever the farmer asked for the slingshot, the birds understood what he said, and they were off in a moment. "My lad," said the farmer, "we must get the better of these birds. From now on, when I want the slingshot, I'll just say, 'Humph!' and you must pass it to me quickly." The flock soon came back. "Humph!" said the farmer. Of course the birds took no notice, but the boy handed the farmer the slingshot, and he had time to fire several stones among them before they got away. As the birds escaped, they met some cranes, who asked them what the matter was. "It's those men," said one rook. "They say one thing and mean another, which has just been the death of some of our friends." Beware of people who say one thing but mean another. The lion, the fox, and the stag. There was once a lion who was very ill. He lay in his den, barely able to move, starving, for he could not hunt. One day the fox paid him a visit. The desperate lion asked for some help. "Please go to the nearby wood and trick the stag who lives there to come to my den. I am craving tasty stag for my dinner." So the fox went to the wood and found the stag, and said to him, "My dear sir, you're in luck. The lion, our king, is at the point of death, and has appointed you to be his successor, to rule over the beasts. Now I must go back to him, and if you take my advice, you'll come too and be with him in his last moments." The stag was flattered at being chosen to be the next king. He followed the fox to the lion's den. No sooner had he got inside than the lion sprang on him. But he was weak from lack of food, and the stag got away with only his ears torn. The lion begged the fox to have another try at coaxing the stag to his den. "It'll be impossible this time," said the fox, "but I'll try." And off he went to the wood again. The fox found the stag resting, recovering from his fright. When he saw the fox, he cried, "What do you mean by trying to lure me to my death? Go now, or I'll kill you with my antlers." But the fox replied, "What a coward you are! The lion meant no harm. He was only going to whisper some royal secrets into your ear when you went off like a scared rabbit.
He might make the Wolf King instead. Unless you come back and show some spirit, I promise he won't hurt you." The stag was foolish enough to return. This time the lion overpowered him and enjoyed his dinner. When the lion wasn't looking, the fox stole the stag's brains as a reward for his trouble. When the lion began searching for them, the fox said, "I don't think there's much point in looking for the brains. A creature who twice walked into a lion's den. Be careful not to make the same mistake twice."
The Four Seasons by Suzanne Slade. Earth's Seasonal Cycle. Most places on Earth have 4 seasons each year. These are winter, spring, summer, and fall. Every season has its own temperature, amount of sunlight, and weather patterns. Seasons last about 3 months. The seasons may be more or less noticeable depending on where you live. All planets in our solar system, including Earth, move around the sun. Earth orbits the sun in about 365 days. As Earth travels around the sun, it leans at an angle. That means different parts of Earth are closer to the sun at different times of the year. The part of Earth that is leaning toward the sun receives more daylight hours and warmth than does the rest of Earth. Seasons are created by the amount of light and warmth that certain areas of Earth receive from the sun during the year. Signs of winter. The winter season is from mid-December to mid-March in the Northern Hemisphere. The Northern Hemisphere is north of the equator, which is an imaginary line that goes around the center of Earth. In winter, temperatures are usually cold because the Northern Hemisphere leans away from the sun. Earth's lean causes the sun to rise later and set earlier, so days are shorter. Although some people think winter arrives with the first snow, winter officially begins about December 22nd in the Northern Hemisphere. This day is called the winter solstice. It is the shortest day of the year. Snow, ice, and freezing temperatures are all signs of winter. It is winter in the Southern Hemisphere from mid-June to mid-September, when it leans away from the sun. In the Southern Hemisphere, the winter solstice is about June 21st. Life in winter. The cold winter season brings changes for plants, animals, and people. For example, most plants stop growing and become dormant or not active. Green leafy deciduous trees drop their leaves and look like bare sticks. One kind of tree stays green during winter. This kind of tree is called an evergreen. Many evergreen trees have thin needles that do not fall off in cold weather. Many animals and insects hibernate all winter. Some birds, such as swallows and robins, migrate to warmer areas. Animals that do not hibernate or migrate must search hard for food and water. People tend to stay inside more during the winter. Some people play sports that use winter's ice and snow, such as ice skating and skiing. People also enjoy winter's holidays, like Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, New Year's Day, and Valentine's Day. Signs of spring. When spring begins, neither the Northern Hemisphere nor the Southern Hemisphere is pointed toward the sun. As spring continues, the Northern Hemisphere leans a little more toward the sun every day. This allows the sun to appear a little higher in the sky each day. Days become longer and temperatures rise. The first day of spring arrives about March 21st in the Northern Hemisphere. This day is called the spring equinox. The word equinox comes from the Latin words for equal and night. The number of hours in the day and the night are equal on this day. The hard frozen ground thaws in the spring and becomes soft and muddy. Signs of spring include melting snow, rain showers, longer days, and windy weather. Life in spring. The longer days and warmer weather of spring cause plants to start growing. Bare deciduous trees sprout fresh new leaves. Flowers such as daffodils and tulips break through the soft spring dirt. Bright green grass begins to grow on the ground. The rains of spring also help plants grow. During the spring, birds return from their winter migration. They build nests to lay their eggs. Animals such as mice, bears, and raccoons come out of hibernation. They are hungry after their long winter and search for food. Butterflies, ants, and thousands of other bugs also reappear in spring. Spring is also the time when farmers begin to plant crops, like corn and wheat, in their fields. People also plant vegetable gardens and flower beds. Signs of summer. As the Northern Hemisphere leans toward the sun, it becomes summer in that area. Days become longer in the summer. Earth's northern half becomes hotter because it has more time to receive heat from the sun. Temperatures also rise because of the sun's position in the sky. The sun moves high in the sky during the middle of a summer day. The sun's rays travel a shorter distance through the air around Earth than they do in winter. This means more of the sun's warmth heats Earth. The hotter temperatures increase the amount of Earth's water that evaporates into the air. The first day of summer is about June 21st in the northern hemisphere. This day is called the summer solstice. It is the longest day of the year. Longer days and hot temperatures are signs of summer. Life in summer. Nature is full of activity in the summer. Butterflies and bees are busy flying from flower to flower collecting food. At night, the flashing lights from fireflies fill the air. Baby birds try their wings as they leave their nests for the first time. Vegetable gardens, fruit trees, and crops grow quickly in the hot sunlight. People enjoy eating fresh summer fruits and vegetables, such as watermelon and corn on the cob. Summer is many people's favorite season. They enjoy the hot weather and long days. People spend a lot of time outdoors fishing, swimming, playing baseball, and having cookouts. Families often take vacations while children are out of school during summer. People in the United States celebrate their freedom and independence on the 4th of July holiday with loud and colorful fireworks shows. Signs of fall. Earth completes its journey around the sun from mid-September to mid-December. As fall begins, neither the northern hemisphere nor the southern hemisphere of Earth is pointing toward the sun. This is just like what happens in spring. As fall continues, though, the northern hemisphere starts to lean away from the sun. The sun rises later and sets earlier each day. The days become shorter, the sun does not climb as high in the sky, and temperatures drop. The fall season begins about September 22nd in the northern hemisphere. This day is called the fall equinox. Day and night are both 12 hours long on the fall equinox. Cool days, colorful falling leaves, and children going back to school are all signs that fall has arrived. Life in fall. Fall is called a season of harvest because farmers spend long hours bringing in crops from their fields. Corn, apples, and pumpkins become ripe in fall. Animals gather and store food for the cold winter ahead. Animals also eat a lot of food to put extra fat on their bodies. They grow a thick coat of warm fur, too. Some birds begin to migrate to warmer places. Green leaves on deciduous trees turn bright colors in fall. During summer, these leaves are green because they have chlorophyll. Trees use chlorophyll and sunlight to make food using photosynthesis. In fall, there is less sunlight, so leaves stop making food and chlorophyll. When the chlorophyll in leaves fades, other colors that were hidden by the green chlorophyll can be seen. Seasons around the world. Some places on Earth do not have 4 seasons. For example, the tropics have 2 seasons, dry and rainy. The tropics are near the equator. This area does not lean toward or away from the sun, but is close to the sun all year long. The North Pole and the South Pole, the ends of Earth farthest from the equator, also have 2 seasons. The weather is always cold during these seasons, called polar summer and polar winter. In polar summer, the sun stays in the sky for 6 months. The sun disappears for a long 6-month night during polar winter. The seasons you have depend on where you live. Changing weather is the most noticeable change in each new season. People, animals, and plants also change during each season of Earth's seasonal cycle.
The Phases of the Moon by Suzanne Slade. Phases of the Moon. The shape of the moon changes every night. Sometimes it is full and round. Other nights it is thin and curved. The different appearances of the moon are called phases. These phases are caused by the movement of the moon. The moon moves in a circle around or orbits planet Earth. The moon is Earth's only natural satellite. Half of the moon's surface is always lit up by the sun. As the moon orbits Earth, you can see a different part of the sunlit half of the moon every night. The moon makes a complete circle around Earth, called a revolution, in about 28 days. Most months are 30 or 31 days long, so you can see a complete cycle of the phases of the moon every month. New moon. There are 8 phases of the moon. The first phase is the new moon. The interesting thing about the new moon is that you cannot see it. During a new moon, the moon is located between the sun and Earth. All the moon's lit side is toward the sun. The side of the moon facing Earth is completely dark. Although you cannot see the new moon, it is easy to observe the moon's other phases. Earth's gravity keeps the moon close. The moon is about 250,000 miles, 402,336 kilometers from Earth. You can also see the moon because it is so large. The moon measures 2,160 miles, 3,476 kilometers across. It is 1/4 the size of Earth. Waxing crescent. The moon's second phase is called the waxing crescent. It appears 1 or 2 days after the new moon. The word crescent means shaped like a C. A waxing crescent moon is small and thin and looks like a backward letter C. Waxing means to get bigger. The moon gets a little bigger every night until it is a full circle. If you watch the sky closely, you will see the waxing crescent moon first appear during the daytime. Earth's day is 24 hours long. Daytime is what we call the part of the day during which we get sunlight. Earth is turned away from the sun during the rest of the 24-hour day. Night is what we call those hours of darkness. The moon's day is about 1 month long. Day and night on the moon each last for about 2 weeks. First quarter. About 7 days after the new moon, the third phase of the moon appears. The right half of the moon shines brightly during this phase, called the first quarter. The moon has finished the first quarter, or 1/4, of its trip around Earth. Sometimes people call this phase a half moon, because half of the moon's surface that faces Earth is lit up by the sun. One side of the moon always faces Earth. This is called the near side. The side of the moon turned away from Earth is called the far side. The moon also rotates or turns as it orbits Earth. It takes the same amount of time for the moon to rotate as it does to orbit Earth. Therefore, the same side of the moon always faces Earth. Waxing gibbous. As the moon continues around Earth, the amount of the sunlit half you can see gets larger. A few days after the first quarter, the moon starts to look like an oval. This phase is called waxing gibbous. Waxing means to grow larger. Gibbous means an oval shape. Like Earth, the moon has gravity. As the moon moves across the sky, its gravity pulls on Earth's oceans and causes tides. A tide is the rising or lowering of water. Oceans near the moon rise because water is pulled to one area by the moon's gravity. This is called a high tide. As water gathers in high tide areas, other parts of the ocean have less water. These areas have a low tide. Full moon. The fifth phase of the moon is a full moon. A full moon looks like a complete circle of light because you see the entire half of the moon that is lit up by the sun. The moon does not create its own light. It reflects the light it gets from the sun. Some full moons provide enough light on Earth to create dim shadows. The moon reflects only 7% of the sunlight that hits it. Sometimes there are 2 full moons in 1 month. The second full moon is called a blue moon. A blue moon is not blue at all. It is usually yellow or white. Blue moons do not happen very often. People say, once in a blue moon, when they mean not very often. Waning gibbous. Following a full moon, the moon starts to wane. To wane means to become smaller. The 6th phase is called waning gibbous. During waning gibbous, the left part of the moon is lit up in an oval shape. A large part of the moon's surface is lit up in the waning gibbous phase. If you look closely, you can see large, dark areas on the moon. These areas are called maria. Maria are flat areas that are hundreds of miles, kilometers wide. From Earth, maria look like lakes or oceans. Maria are actually covered with a fine gray dust called regolith. The rest of the moon's surface is covered with regolith too. You may also see craters on the moon. Craters are formed when meteorites crash into the moon. Meteorites are large rocks that float in space. Last quarter. 7 days after the full moon, the seventh phase will appear. This is called the last quarter moon. The left half of the moon is lit up during the last quarter. Some people call this a half moon because they see a half circle lit up. The moon does not have an atmosphere as Earth does. An atmosphere is a mix of different gases that surrounds a planet. Earth's atmosphere blocks some of the sun's strong and harmful rays. Without an atmosphere, the moon's temperature gets as high as 225 degrees Fahrenheit, 107 degrees Celsius. An atmosphere also holds heat near a planet at night. Temperatures on the moon get as low as minus 243 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 153 degrees Celsius at night. Waning crescent. The eighth phase of the moon is the waning crescent. The moon continues to wane or get smaller and becomes a thin crescent shape. The left side of the moon is lit up during the waning crescent phase, so it looks like a C. The moon has almost finished its 28-day trip around Earth. Soon the new moon will return, and the moon will begin its cycle again. Throughout history, people have been curious about the moon. In 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first astronaut to walk on the moon. His footprints are still there, as is the American flag he placed in the ground. If you were ever to go to the moon, what would you leave for the next visitor? Eclipses. A lunar eclipse occurs when Earth is between the sun and the moon. During a lunar eclipse, Earth blocks the sun's light from reaching the moon. The entire surface of the moon is dark. When the moon lines up exactly between the sun and Earth, this is called a solar eclipse. During a solar eclipse, the moon blocks the sun's rays from hitting Earth. Although the sun is 400 times larger than the moon is 400 times closer to Earth than the sun is. So the moon perfectly blocks the sun's light from Earth. Earth's closest neighbor, the moon, makes a beautiful changing light in Earth's night sky. The next time you look up at the moon, notice its shape. Can you recognize the moon's phase in the lunar cycle? Which phase of the lunar cycle is it in tonight?
Learning about energy with graphic organizers by Jonathan Kravitz. What is energy? Energy is the ability to do work. Every time you lift a chair or walk to school, you use energy. When you eat a sandwich, your body gets energy. It changes the energy stored in the sandwich into energy for your body. Your body uses that energy to do work. The bus that drives you to school burns gasoline energy to do work. You are burning energy right now by reading this book. The two basic types of energy are potential energy and kinetic energy. Potential energy is work that a thing might do. A rock sitting on top of a hill has potential energy because it could roll down the hill. Kinetic energy is moving energy. A rock rolling down the hill has kinetic energy because it is moving. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. Energy has always existed in one form or another. Forms of energy. Energy can come in many different forms. It can be changed from one type to another. The energy that lights our houses comes from electric energy. This is supplied by power plants that change fossil fuels, wind, water, or sunlight into electric energy. Energy can also come directly from fossil fuels. Gasoline is an example of a fossil fuel. It provides energy for cars. Food is a source or supply of energy. Our bodies change food into energy. Plants change sunlight into energy they can use to grow. Turn on a desk lamp or stand close to a fire. You will see light energy and feel heat energy. Do you hear the sound of a fly's wings? You can hear this because sound is carried through the air on vibrations called sound waves. How is energy measured? Energy can be measured in a number of ways. Scientists measure energy in joules. Joules are named in honor of James Prescott Joule. He figured out that heat is a type of energy. A joule is the amount of energy needed to lift a 1 pound, 0.5 kilogram object, 9 inches, 23 centimeters, off the ground. Shooting a basketball from the free throw line takes about 15 joules. Throwing a fastball takes about 120 joules. Running a car for 5 minutes at 50 miles per hour equals about 373,737 joules. Other common ways people measure energy are the British Thermal Unit, BTU, the volt, and the calorie. BTUs are sometimes used when talking about heating systems. Volts are used to measure electricity. Calories are a measure of the amount of energy in food. Changing energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be changed into other types of energy. This is the first law of thermodynamics. The food you eat has potential energy. After you eat it, your body changes it into energy so you can read, run, and talk. When your body uses that stored energy to do work, it becomes kinetic energy. The potential energy stored in a flashlight battery changes into light and heat energy when the flashlight is turned on. The gasoline in a car is stored energy that gets changed into kinetic energy when the car is started. Your television takes electric energy and changes it into light and sound. The energy we use every day comes from many sources. These sources get changed when their potential energy is released or let out. Electricity. Electricity is used to power light bulbs, TV sets, computers, and many other household appliances. Electricity is easily changed into other forms of energy, such as heat and light. Electricity flows along wires, which makes it easy to conduct. Electricity is caused by charged particles. All matter is made up of tiny particles called atoms. Atoms are made up of protons, electrons, and neutrons. Protons are positively charged and are drawn to electrons. Electrons have a negative charge. That is the charge opposite to that of protons. Neutrons have no charge. Protons and neutrons sit in the center of atoms in the nucleus. Electrons whiz around the nucleus. Electrons can move from one atom to another. When electrons move between atoms, a current of electricity is created. Fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are sources of potential energy that come from under the ground. There are three major types of fossil fuel. They are coal, oil, and natural gas. Fossil fuels were formed over hundreds of millions of years. They are non-renewable. That means there is a limited amount of them. Coal is a hard, black, rock-like matter. Coal is found in many places in the United States. Coal is mined or dug out from the ground. Oil is a thick liquid. Natural gas is an odorless gas. To get oil and natural gas, companies drill into the earth. The oil and natural gas are then drawn up from below ground by machines. More than half of the oil we use comes from outside the United States. Most of it comes from the Middle East. The potential energy in fossil fuels is changed by burning it. Nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is the energy held inside atoms. Nuclear reactions release this energy from the mass of atoms. This mass energy is released in two ways. They are fission and fusion. In nuclear fission, the nuclei of atoms are split. This releases a lot of energy. This energy is used to produce electricity at a nuclear power plant. If the energy of a fission reaction is let out all at once, it can cause an explosion. Another form of nuclear energy is called fusion. In nuclear fusion, smaller nuclei are joined to make a larger nucleus. Nuclear fusion gives off a lot of heat and light. Scientists have tried to make a fusion reactor that produces electricity more efficiently. They keep trying because nuclear fusion creates less waste than fission. Also, its supply of fuel lasts longer. Hydropower and geothermal energy. The kinetic energy of moving water can be used to do work. Moving water can be used to make electricity at hydroelectric plants. Hydroelectric energy is made from water power. Hydroelectric energy supplies about 7% of the electricity used in the United States. The heat of Earth is also a source of energy. It is called geothermal energy. Geo means earth, and thermal means heat. Hot water or steam from below ground can be used to make electricity using a geothermal power plant. Geothermal energy supplies about 0.4% of the electricity used in the United States. Hydro and geothermal energy are both renewable sources of energy. That means the supply of these fuels will not run out. Solar and wind energy. Energy from the sun is called solar energy. It is made up of heat and light energy. We use the sun's energy every day in many different ways. Solar energy can be used to produce electricity. It can also be used to heat water using special solar cells. Solar energy can only be gathered when the sun is shining. The energy produced by the sun can be stored and used later. Wind can also be used to do work. The wind can be changed into other forms of energy, such as electric energy, which can then be stored. Farmers have been using wind energy for many years. They draw water from wells using windmills. Today, wind is used to make electricity. One small windmill can power a home or a school. Conservation. Only around 7% of the world's energy comes from renewable energy sources. Most of our energy supply comes from fossil fuels. Fossil fuels take millions of years to form. Once they are used, they are gone forever. That's why it is important to conserve or save energy. There are simple ways you can use less energy. You can turn off appliances and lights when you are not using them. You can recycle. It takes a lot of energy to make newspapers, plastic bottles, and other goods. Recycling means using these things again. They can be used to make new newspapers, bottles, and other goods. There is another way people can help avoid running out of energy. It is to use more renewable energy sources, like solar power, wind power, and hydropower.
What are natural disasters? By Louise Spilsbury. Wild Earth. Most of the time and in most places in the world, Earth is quite safe. Now and then, however, Earth turns wild. A volcano erupts. An earthquake splits open the land. A flood covers fields and villages in raging water. Hurricanes blow down trees and homes. Natural disasters affect thousands of people every year. They cause injury and death. They destroy homes and buildings. We should never underestimate the power of nature. Volcanoes. A volcanic eruption happens when fountains of hot, melted rock called lava spurt out of a hole in Earth's surface. When big volcanoes explode, they shoot out broken rocks along with lava. The rocks fall to the land, and smoke makes the air black. The surface of Earth is a thin layer of hard rock called the crust. Below it is hot liquid rock called magma. A volcanic eruption begins when magma rises up through the crust. As it rises, the hot rock melts anything in its way, making a tunnel to the surface. Then the volcano erupts. Volcanic eruptions can be very destructive, but they can also create new landforms. Earthquakes. Earthquakes cause more damage than any other type of natural disaster. Small earthquakes make the ground tremble. They might shake a cup off a table. Large earthquakes can bring down buildings, crack open the ground, and buckle bridges. In a big earthquake, the land can ripple up and down like waves on the sea. Most earthquakes are caused by changes in Earth's outermost shell, or crust. The crust is made up of about a dozen rock masses called plates that are constantly moving. In different places, they move apart, collide, or slide past each other. Over time, this movement causes great pressure to build up. When the pressure becomes too great, the rock masses shift along a crack in the crust called a fault. Tsunamis. A tsunami is a huge wave that becomes bigger as it comes closer to land. Tsunamis can be 100 feet, 30 meters tall. They crash onto harbors and coasts as enormous walls of water. Tsunamis can wash boats onto land and sweep away cars, buildings, and trees. They can bury fields and towns underwater. Tsunamis usually happen because of an earthquake on the ocean floor. If one of Earth's plates suddenly slips below the ocean floor, this sends an enormous shudder through the seawater. The shudder creates massive waves. Underwater volcanoes can also cause tsunamis. They happen when volcanic eruptions cause large blocks of ice or rock to fall and crash into the sea. Hurricanes. Hurricanes are forceful, destructive storms. They begin over warm seas. The warm water heats up the air just above it. When air heats up, it becomes lighter and rises. Cooler air fills the space the warm air leaves behind. This creates winds. When hot air rises quickly, the winds move faster and start to spin. When the winds spin quickly, they become a hurricane. Some hurricanes stay over the ocean. They can whip up massive waves that cause floods. Others move at high speed toward land. The strong winds and heavy rain hurricanes bring can last for days or weeks. Hurricanes can blow down buildings, move automobiles, and uproot trees. Tornadoes. A tornado is a spinning tower of air that twists down to the ground from a thunderstorm cloud. Most tornadoes are small, last for a few seconds, and do no damage. A few are hundreds of feet wide and miles tall, and can last for several hours. Like huge vacuum cleaners, they suck up everything in their way and drop it down again later. Tornadoes start above land during a storm when warm, wet winds from one direction meet colder, drier winds coming from another direction. The warm air rises over the cold air and starts to spin. The rising, spinning air sucks in warm air from just above the ground. This warm air rises and makes the tornado higher and higher. The winds of a tornado are the strongest on Earth. Floods. When water overflows onto dry land, a flood takes place. Floods can happen without any warning. Large amounts of water are very heavy, and when water moves fast, it can be extremely forceful. When water suddenly floods an area of land, it can wash away people, cars, and other objects. Floods also fill buildings with water and mud, and cover fields, destroying the crops that grow there. Some floods happen when a lot of rain falls in a short time. The rain fills rivers until they spill over their banks. In Asia and Africa, heavy rain falls during the monsoon season, causing floods. Some floods happen when tsunamis or large waves caused by hurricanes hit land. Avalanches. An avalanche is a large amount of snow that moves quickly down the side of a mountain. The avalanche can knock down everything in its path. When an avalanche hits trees, rocks, and other objects with great force, it often drags them along. When it reaches the bottom of a mountain, the avalanche can bury whole towns in thick, heavy snow. Some avalanches happen after it has rained. When an area of snow gets very wet and heavy, it can suddenly slide down a slope. Avalanches can also happen when there are heavy winds or after it has been snowing heavily. People trapped under avalanches can die of hypothermia if they are not rescued quickly. Landslides. A landslide is a large amount of rock, soil, or mud that moves down a steep slope. Some landslides move slowly, but others can race downhill very quickly. When large amounts of rock and mud roll down a slope, they knock things down. Whole towns at the bottom of slopes can be buried in mud during a landslide. Landslides happen when a layer of earth or rocks separates from the layer below it. Gravity pulls the loose layer downward. Mud on a slope can collapse when heavy rains make it soft and heavy. People can cause landslides when they cut down trees on a slope. Tree roots help fix the soil to a slope. Without them, soil slides easily downhill. Wildfires. A wildfire is an uncontrolled fire that spreads through a wide area of forest, bushes, or grasses. Some wildfires start when lightning strikes dry plants. However, people start most wildfires, usually accidentally. They can start when campfires get out of control or are not put out properly when people leave. Some fires start when people drop burning cigarettes. After a wildfire starts, the flames spread quickly from plant to plant. A wildfire soon gets out of control. Large wildfires last for several days and destroy many plants. They also kill the animals that live among the plants. Wildfires that reach towns can kill people too. Droughts. A drought is when a place gets little or no rain for a long period of time. Droughts happen most often in places that are already hot and dry, such as parts of the United States, Australia, and Africa. Without water, soil becomes dry and begins to crack. Plants need water to live, so they start to die when soil dries out. Drought has killed more people than any other type of natural disaster. If a drought happens in a poor country, people cannot buy water from elsewhere. When plants die, there is no food for farm animals or people to eat. Without plants, such as corn, and animals, such as cows, to eat, people go hungry and may die. blizzards. A blizzard is a powerful snowstorm that brings strong winds and lots of snow and ice. In a blizzard, winds blow at 35 miles per hour, 56 kilometers per hour, or faster for at least 3 hours. Winds swirl ice and snow around in the air, causing low visibility. This makes it difficult for people to see where they are going. Blizzard winds blow snow into huge piles called snowdrifts. If heavy snowdrifts build up on houses, they can cause roofs to collapse. Snowdrifts also block roads and trap people in their homes, so they cannot travel to get food. Snowdrifts can be so deep that they can bury houses and trains. If people are trapped outdoors, they might die of hypothermia. Be prepared. There may be more natural disasters in the future because of climate change. As Earth gets hotter, there will be more fires and droughts. When ice at the poles melts, the level of the sea will rise and cause floods. We can reduce the risk of climate change by using fewer fossil fuels. People can take steps to reduce the risk of natural disasters. People in areas where tornadoes are common build safe shelters in which to hide until a tornado has passed by. People build special fences on mountain slopes to stop avalanches. Everyone can learn what to do to keep safe if a natural disaster strikes in their area. The Lungs in Your Body by Christine Figueredo. Your lungs. Try to sit perfectly still. Notice how your chest rises and falls? That is because your lungs are working to keep you breathing. Breathing is involuntary. Your lungs do it without your thinking about it. Lungs are bag-like organs or body parts. All animals that have a backbone and breathe air, like you, have lungs. When an animal inhales, breathes in, air filled with oxygen flows into the lungs. The body needs a steady supply of oxygen to live. When an animal exhales, breathes out, a different gas flows out of the lungs. Other organs in the body help with breathing. For example, the brain sends signals to the lungs to make sure the breathing never stops. Locating the lungs. A human body has 2 lungs. One lung is on each side of the chest. They make one of the largest organs in the body. Each lung has about 300 million tiny air sacs. If it were possible to stretch these air sacs out and lay them flat, your lungs would cover an area as large as a tennis court. The left lung is a little smaller than the right lung. Its smaller size makes room for the heart, which sits between them. The lungs are protected by the rib cage, which surrounds them. The lungs sit on a muscle called a diaphragm. In normal breathing, the diaphragm and muscles between the ribs automatically tighten and relax. This movement helps the lungs to fill with air and to empty. The respiratory system. Lungs do not breathe by themselves. A body's breathing relies on its entire respiratory system. The human respiratory system includes a number of parts: mouth, nose, throat, voice box, windpipe, bronchial tubes, and lungs. Air enters the respiratory system through the nose or mouth. The throat has 2 passageways, one for air and one for food. The passage for food is called the esophagus, which is part of the digestive system. The upper part of the air passage contains the voice box. The lower part contains the windpipe. The windpipe separates into 2 main branches called bronchial tubes or bronchi. Each attaches to a lung. Oxygen provider. The main role of the lungs is to provide the body with oxygen. Oxygen is a gas that the body needs in order to survive. The lungs also allow the body to get rid of another gas called carbon dioxide. When you breathe in, air enters the lungs. Tiny blood vessels within the lungs absorb oxygen from the air. The blood then carries the oxygen through other blood vessels to all the cells of the body. Cells are basic units that make up all living things. The cells take in the oxygen and release carbon dioxide back into the blood. The blood brings the carbon dioxide to the lungs, where it is released when you breathe out. Let's talk. You also need your lungs in order to talk. Your voice box sits at the top of the windpipe. Inside the voice box are vocal cords. These are a pair of stretchy folds that create the voice. As air exhales from your lungs, it passes between the vocal cords and makes them vibrate. This vibration makes sounds. Your voice box makes these sounds louder. Then they pass through your throat, mouth, and nose. You use your tongue, teeth, lips, jaw, and palate, roof of the mouth, to shape the sounds to make words. If you want to say many words quickly or speak loudly, you need to exhale more air. Shouting requires a lot of air from the lungs. Protection. Another job of the lungs is to help keep germs and other harmful things out of the body. Inside the lungs are cells that produce mucus. Mucus is a sticky substance that traps pollutants and bacteria. Tiny hairs called cilia also keep dirt and bacteria out of the lungs. They move in waves to push the mucus up out of the airways. When you cough, the mucus as well as the bacteria and other irritating particles are forced out of the body. The lungs also have patrolling cells that swallow up foreign particles or destroy them. What lungs look like? Healthy lungs look pink on the outside and feel spongy. The right lung has 3 rounded sections, called lobes. The left lung has 2 lobes. Tubes used for carrying air connect to the lungs in a branch-like manner. The series begins with the windpipe. Before it enters the lungs, it branches into the 2 tubes called bronchi. Each of these leads to a different lung. The bronchial tubes then divide into a web of smaller tubes called bronchioles. There are about 30,000 bronchioles in just one lung. Each bronchiole leads to many tiny air sacs called alveoli. The air sacs are what make a lung feel spongy. Every tiny part has a big job. The alveoli, the tiny air sacs in the lungs, are covered with blood vessels called capillaries. These capillaries are so small that blood cells must line up one by one to get through them. Although tiny, alveoli and capillaries are important. Through them, oxygen gets to the blood cells. The blood cells then deliver the oxygen to your entire body. Inhale. Breathe in. Breathing in is called inhaling. When the muscle at the base of the lungs, called the diaphragm, moves down and the ribs move out, the area inside your chest grows larger. Air then flows in through your mouth or nose, down the windpipe, and into your lungs. Oxygen gas in the air is able to pass through the thin walls of the alveoli into the capillaries. Red blood cells inside the capillaries pick up the oxygen and take it to the heart. Then the heart sends the blood filled with oxygen to all the cells in your body. Exhale. Breathe out. After you inhale, you must exhale or breathe out. Exhaling is important for ridding the body of waste gas. As red blood cells deliver oxygen to the body's cells, they pick up waste gas that the cells do not need. These waste gases include carbon dioxide and water vapor. The red blood cells carry the waste gas back to the lungs. They travel through the capillaries and send the waste gas into the alveoli. The diaphragm muscle then pushes the waste gas through the bronchioles, out the bronchi, up the windpipe, and finally out the nose or mouth. Even on a cold day, air that is exhaled will be warm. This is because air picks up heat as it travels through the body. Why lungs get sick? Lungs can develop many different problems. Some people have a breathing problem called asthma. Their bronchioles sometimes tighten so that air cannot get into the alveoli. It is one of the most common long-term health problems in children. Another sickness is bronchitis, which is when the bronchi are sore or damaged. Bronchitis makes it hard for air to get to the alveoli. People with bronchitis cannot breathe easily, cough a lot, and feel pain in their chests. An illness called pneumonia causes the lungs to swell. The lungs have a hard time absorbing the oxygen in the air. Pneumonia makes people feel very sick and tired. Thank you for not smoking. Smoking is bad for the whole body. It is especially bad for the lungs. Smoke damages cilia so that they cannot keep dirt and other harmful things out of the lungs. Smoke also breaks down the walls of the alveoli. Over time, inhaling cigarette smoke causes the lungs to become so damaged that they are unable to heal. Emphysema or lung cancer can result. Both are deadly diseases of the lungs. People who inhale smoke in the air from other people's smoking can also get these diseases. In many ways, the lungs are strong. However, any kind of smoke can easily damage them. Firefighters often warn that more people die from inhaling the smoke of a fire than from burn injuries. Keeping your lungs healthy. What do your lungs help you do every day? They do more than help you breathe, talk, or shout. One could argue that the lungs help the entire body do everything that it does. That is why it is important to keep your lungs healthy. You can help your lungs stay healthy by not smoking. Other pollution in the air, such as exhaust from cars, can also hurt the lungs. Exercising is a good way to keep your lungs strong and healthy. It is good for your whole body, too. When you exercise, your body has to do more than it usually does. For example, running requires your legs to move faster. Your body cells need more oxygen to do that extra work. You must breathe harder and faster to get oxygen to your cells. That exercises your lungs, which makes them stronger and healthier.
The Bones in Your Body by Laura Loria. Why do we have bones? You cannot see them, but you can feel them. You cannot stand or move without them, but you hardly ever notice them. Bones are your body's hidden frame. Bones provide a structure for your other body parts. They are connected to your muscles, and they make it possible for you to walk and run. Some bones protect the organs inside your body, such as your lungs and heart. From the outside, a bone looks hard and still, but inside it is always working. Bones store nutrients, or things your body needs. Bones also make blood cells. Bone structure. Bones are made of calcium and other minerals, fibers of protein, and water. If you look at a bone that has been cut, you might be surprised to see that it has several layers. The outer layer of a bone is compact bone. It is firm and dense. The inner layer is spongy bone. It looks like a sponge with many holes, but it is not soft or flexible. The holes in spongy bone are filled with bone marrow. Marrow is soft like jelly and can be red or yellow. Most blood cells are created by red marrow, while fat is stored in yellow marrow. All bones are covered with a membrane or skin. The membrane contains nerves and blood vessels that are attached to the bone. The blood vessels carry nutrients to the bone. They also carry blood cells from the bone to the rest of the body. How are bones connected? All of the body's bones and the tissues that connect them make up the skeletal system. Bones are held together by strips of tissue called ligaments. In between the bones is a cushion made of cartilage, which is strong but flexible. Cartilage keeps bones from grinding against each other. Joints are structures that hold together two or more bones. Joints give the bones support and allow the skeleton to move. Bones are connected to muscles by tendons, another kind of tough cord. Bones work with muscles to make the body move. In order to move, the brain sends a signal to the muscles. The muscles then pull or push on the bone. Types of bones. There are 4 types of bones in the human body. Leg and arm bones are examples of long bones. They look like tubes with 2 bumps at each end. Long bones help the body move. Short bones are found in the ankles and wrists. They are cube-shaped and consist mostly of spongy bone. The bones in the skull and rib cage are flat bones. They are often thinner than other bones. They protect important organs from damage. Irregular bones don't have any particular shape. They are each unique. They include the upper and lower jaw bones and the bones in the spine. Focus on the spine. One interesting group of bones makes up the spine. The spine is easy to find. It runs up and down your back. You can feel its bumpy shape through your skin. The spine helps you stand upright. The spine is made up of 33 vertebrae. Most of the vertebrae are ring-shaped. Between most of them is a disc of cartilage. There are several groups of vertebrae that do different jobs. At the top of the spine, the cervical vertebrae support the head. Underneath that, the thoracic vertebrae are attached to the ribs, which protect the heart and lungs. Toward the bottom of the spine are the lumbar vertebrae. These provide strength and balance. Focus on the hand. Human hands are complex. The bones in the hand are connected in ways that let you grip, push, and pull objects. There are 27 bones in each hand. Each finger has 3, and the thumb has 2. This group is called the phalanges. The palm has 5 bones. They are the metacarpals. All of these are long bones, which means that they are longer than they are wide. They are connected by joints. In the wrist, there are 8 short bones. These are called carpal bones. Along with 4 joints, the carpal bones allow your hand to bend and twist. Focus on the skull. The hard bones in your head make up the skull. The skull acts like a shell for your brain and protects it from injury. It also gives your face its shape. The cranium on the top and back of your head covers your brain. It feels like one piece, but it is actually made up of several bones that are joined together. A baby's cranium has spaces between these bones. As a baby grows, his or her bones meet up at joints that do not move. The rest of the skull makes up your face. There are holes that support and protect your eyes, and an opening that allows air to come through your nose. There is also a hole for the spinal cord to connect to your brain. Keeping bones healthy. There are several ways to keep your bones healthy. The first is to eat foods that have the vitamins and minerals that help build bone. Those foods include milk and other dairy products, leafy green vegetables, such as spinach and kale, and some fish. Exercise also helps make your bones strong. It is good for your muscles and your overall health as well. However, it is important to protect your bones while you are taking part in physical activities. Wearing protective gear like helmets or shin guards while playing sports will give your bones extra protection. How do we see bones? If there is a problem with one of your bones, a doctor may need to see the bone. The most common way for a doctor to view bones is to use an X-ray machine. X-rays are powerful waves of energy. These rays can go through some material that light cannot go through. To see the bones inside a body, the rays are sent through the body. The X-rays pass through the skin and soft tissues, such as muscle. But hard body parts, such as bones, block the X-rays. Special film captures the image made by the X-rays. Sometimes an X-ray picture is not clear enough. In that case, a doctor might order other types of tests that give a clearer image. These tests take longer, but can give a doctor more information. Breaking a bone. Even if you eat healthy food and are careful with your body, you might get hurt. Fractures or broken bones happen when too much pressure is placed on a bone. When a bone breaks all the way through but stays under the skin, it is a simple fracture. When a bone breaks and pokes through the skin, it is called a compound fracture. Doctors use X-rays to see what kind of fracture a patient has. The doctor then sets the bone back in place, sometimes using metal pins, and usually puts a cast over it. A cast can be made of plaster, fiberglass, or plastic. A cast protects the broken bone and keeps it still so it can heal. Bone diseases. Like other parts of the body, bones get diseases. Most of the diseases affect older adults. Keeping good health habits when you are young can prevent you from developing some bone diseases. Arthritis is a disease of the joints where bones meet. It causes painful swelling. People with arthritis in their hands and wrists have a hard time holding or squeezing things. Leukemia is a blood cancer that can occur in the bone marrow. The white blood cells of people with leukemia do not work correctly. This makes it hard for their bodies to fight infections. After about age 40, people begin to lose some of the material in their bones. If they lose too much, their bones may break easily. Low bone density is sometimes caused by poor diet and lack of exercise. Bone replacement. Bones can sometimes heal themselves by creating new tissue. Special cells start making new bone by building a structure of protein. Blood brings in calcium, which sticks to the protein structure. The calcium builds up and hardens, creating the bone structure. Sometimes, however, bones cannot heal themselves. Joints can wear out over time, or disease can wear away at bones. Scientists, therefore, have come up with several ways to replace bones. Surgeons can replace hips, knees, shoulders, and many other joints and bones. The replacements are usually made of metals, ceramics, and plastics. Bone marrow creates blood cells for our bodies, so it is important for it to stay healthy. When it becomes diseased, doctors may perform a bone marrow transplant. Scientists around the world are experimenting with new ways to create better artificial bones. Rattan, a type of wood, has been used to replace bones in animals after it has been treated with chemicals and heated. Other scientists are using forms of plastic to create molds for metal replacement bones. Another exciting new tool for doctors is 3D printing. A 3D printer works like a computer printer, But instead of printing a flat page, it uses plastics and other substances to create an object from exact measurements. The object can be placed in the body where bone cells can attach to it and grow new bone. This means that in the future, a doctor could create a whole new bone for a person that would fit perfectly. What is the water cycle? By Louise Spilsbury. Earth's water. Water is all around us. There is water in rivers, lakes, and oceans. There is also water in the air and in the ground. There is water inside plants and inside animals too, including people. Most of Earth's water is in the oceans. Ocean water contains salt. Water in rivers, lakes, and ponds is called fresh water because it does not contain salt. Water makes up more than half of our body weight, but we lose some water every day. We drink liquid to replace the water that we lose. Humans can last for weeks without food, but would die within days without water. Recycling. Water does not stay in the same place all the time. It is constantly recycled. Recycling means to take something old and change it into something new. Earth's water is continually moving from one place to another and from one form to another. Water leaves Earth's surface and rises into the air. Later, gravity pulls it back to Earth in the form of rain or snow. This process is called the water cycle. Things need energy to make them work. It is heat from the sun that provides the energy to make the water cycle work. The sun gives off huge amounts of heat energy. Although the sun is far from Earth, its surface is so hot that some of its heat travels through space to Earth. Evaporation. When the sun shines, it heats up water at the surface of rivers, lakes, and oceans. At a certain temperature, this water evaporates. This means that it changes from a liquid to a gas. As a gas, it floats in the air. A gas is a substance that is usually colorless and invisible and has no shape or size of its own. When water becomes a gas, we call it water vapor. We see evaporation in action every day. We see it when we hang out wet laundry so it can dry in the air. We also see water evaporate quickly as steam when we boil water in a teapot or heat a pan of water. Plants. A lot of water evaporates into the air from plants. Plants take in water and nutrients from the ground through their roots to make food and to hold themselves upright. The water and nutrients travel up a plant through little tubes. When water escapes from leaves at the top of the tubes, more water is sucked into the roots. Water escapes from leaves because it evaporates. When the sun warms the leaves, it heats up water inside the leaves too. This makes some of the water evaporate. It turns into water vapor and passes out of tiny holes in the leaves into the air around them. Condensation. Condensation happens when a gas changes into a liquid. Water vapor is very light, so it floats up into the air. The farther above Earth's surface something travels, the cooler it becomes. As water vapor rises higher in the air, it gets cooler. When water vapor gets cold, it condenses. It changes back into tiny droplets of liquid water. Large groups of these droplets are called clouds. We see condensation every day. In a hot bathroom, water vapor from the steamy air condenses into liquid on a cold mirror. When you pour a glass of cold water on a hot day, water forms on the outside of the glass. This is because the water vapor in the warm air turns back into liquid when it touches cold glass. Clouds. When water vapor condenses into tiny drops of water, the drops form clouds. Clouds look light and fluffy, but each one is made up of billions of droplets of water. Clouds move with the wind. Many clouds start to form above oceans, where most water evaporates. Wind blows the vapor over land, where we see clouds gathering. There are different types of clouds. The type of cloud depends on how much water vapor it contains, how cold the air is in the sky where it is, and what the wind is doing. If wind blows a cloud into warm air, the droplets of water that make up the cloud evaporate, and the cloud disappears. If it is cooler, more and more water vapor condenses in the air. Then clouds grow bigger and darker. Rain. Droplets of water spend about 8 days in the sky. They are blown about by the wind. As the droplets of water that make up a cloud blow about, they bump into each other and form bigger and bigger drops of water. When the drops of water become too big and heavy to float, they fall from the sky as rain. As wind blows clouds across land, some clouds meet high areas of land called mountains. The steep sides of a mountain force clouds higher up into the sky. This cools more water vapor in the clouds, which falls to the ground as rain. Snow and ice. Snow and ice can form in clouds too. Some clouds rise up quickly through the sky to the point where the air is very, very cold. There, water droplets freeze. They change from water to solid ice. The ice may fall to earth as hailstones, which are small balls of ice, or it may fall as snowflakes. After snow and ice hit the ground, they eventually melt into water once more. In the coldest parts of the world, snow never melts. Instead, new layers of snow build up on old layers of snow. The weight of the upper layers eventually turns the lower layers to ice. In fact, almost 3/4 of all the fresh water in the world is frozen into ice at the North and South Poles, underground. Some of the water that falls to earth from clouds runs off the land. It runs into rivers or seeps into soil. Some sinks through cracks in the rock below soil to go deep underground. This groundwater collects in holes in underground rock or forms underground pools or streams. Groundwater sources store huge amounts of fresh water. Some groundwater rises to Earth's surface through natural openings called springs. People also drill holes called wells into land to reach groundwater. Some groundwater is pumped to the surface by machines. 1/3 of all the people in the world get their drinking water from groundwater supplies. On the move. Water is always moving in the water cycle. Sometimes it moves quickly. For example, rain evaporates off a surface, such as a puddle on a sidewalk, almost at once. Some water moves more slowly through the cycle. Ice can stay frozen in a glacier for thousands of years before it melts and flows into a lake. It can then stay in the lake for thousands of years before evaporating into the air again. Water may stay under the ground for thousands of years. Gradually, it may be taken up by plant roots and returned to the air through leaves. Water may also soak into streams, which flow into a river. Rivers flow into oceans, so some groundwater will evaporate from the ocean. Water cycle. The water cycle does not have a beginning or an end. Water goes on, flowing, evaporating, condensing, and falling back to Earth where it flows again. The water cycle has been happening for millions of years. The water cycle means we can use the same water again and again and again. The water cycle also cleans the water that evaporates from Earth. As water evaporates and changes from a liquid into a gas, any dirt that was in it is lost. The water in the oceans is salty, and we cannot drink or use it. However, when it evaporates, the salt is left behind. The water is now clean and falls back to Earth as fresh water we can drink. Water and people. Water is cleaned when it goes through the water cycle, but it can be on Earth hundreds or thousands of years before it evaporates. When we pollute water on Earth, we reduce the amount of clean water we can use. People pollute water by dumping things in it, such as litter and dirty water from buildings and factories. There are many things people can do to help keep the world's water clean. They can avoid throwing paints, oils, and litter down sinks or drains, or into rivers, lakes, and oceans. They can also use household cleaners and bathroom products that are not harmful to the environment. Saving water. One way to make sure there is enough clean, fresh water in the future is to reduce the amount we use today. There are lots of ways to save water. People can save up to 8 gallons, 30 liters of water every day by turning off the faucet while they brush their teeth. We can save around 10 gallons, 38 liters of water by taking a quick shower instead of a bath. Families can save water by collecting rain that falls on their house and into gutters. Then they can use it to wash cars and water plants, rather than using water from the faucet. Companies are also making dishwashers and other machines that use less water than they did before.
Muscles in Your Body by Bobby Martin. Muscles work around the clock. Muscles are an important part of your body. Anything you can imagine yourself doing uses muscles. You need muscles to run, throw a ball, or ride a bike. You also use muscles at times when it seems like you are not doing anything. It takes muscles to smile, read a book, or swallow food. Even when you are sleeping, many of your muscles are still hard at work. Muscles in your digestive system are turning the food you ate for dinner into fuel for your body. The muscle in your heart is beating and pumping blood. Muscles in your chest are helping you breathe. Your muscles work all day and all night, too. Types of muscles. Your body has 3 types of muscles: skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. Skeletal muscle connects to your bones. These muscles come in all shapes and sizes because they do different jobs. A muscle in your ears is your smallest muscle. It moves the smallest bone you have. Muscles in your legs are large and strong. They must move and support your whole body. Cardiac muscle is located in the heart. It pumps blood by squeezing and relaxing in a regular pattern of beats called the heartbeat. Smooth muscle lines the intestines, stomach, and other organs in the body. These muscles are not connected to bones. They control what your organs do without you having to think about it. Involuntary and voluntary muscles. Your cardiac muscle and your smooth muscles are also called involuntary muscles. That means you cannot control them, even if you try. These muscles work without you having to think about them. Most of your involuntary muscles, such as the smooth muscles in your lungs, stomach, and blood vessels, are controlled by your nervous system. The nervous system is a network of nerves that send messages between the brain and other parts of the body. The cardiac muscle controls itself, but it can also respond to messages from the nervous system. Because you choose when you want your skeletal muscles to move, they are called voluntary muscles. When you turn a page of a book, you are using voluntary muscles. You think about turning the page, and then your arm, hand, and fingers work together to make that happen. Skeletal muscles. Strong cord-like tissues called tendons connect your skeletal muscles to your bones. Skeletal muscles move your bones by contracting and relaxing. Muscles can only pull your bones. They cannot push, so they often work in pairs. First, one muscle contracts and pulls the bone one way. Then that muscle relaxes, and the second muscle contracts to pull the bone back again. Besides moving your bones, your skeletal muscles have other important jobs. They help hold your posture, the position of the body. They also help keep your body at the right temperature. When muscles contract and relax, they make heat that warms your body. When you are cold, your muscles may shiver, which means your muscles contract and relax very quickly many times. That process makes heat to warm you up again. To tell a muscle to move, your brain sends a message along a type of nerve called a motor nerve. Motor nerves end in the fibers of your muscles. These nerves release chemicals into the muscle. This process starts a wave of activity that creates the energy that moves your muscle. Skeletal muscles perform difficult tasks quickly. They sometimes get tired and need to rest. Skeletal muscles are made up of bundles of long, thin fibers. If you look at skeletal muscle under a microscope, it looks striped. This is because the ends of some fibers lay over the ends of other fibers. The parts that overlap each other look like dark stripes. Smooth muscles. Not all muscles look striped. Some muscles look smooth under a microscope. Smooth muscles work in the hollow parts of your body. The smooth muscles in your lungs help you breathe. Smooth muscles also move food through your stomach and intestines. Smooth muscles contract in all directions. They use less energy than skeletal muscles because they contract and relax more slowly. Your nervous system controls your smooth muscles for you. Imagine if you had to think about each breath you took, or if you had to tell your stomach to digest your food. You would be too busy thinking about those basic activities to be able to do anything else. Cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is found only in your heart. Like your skeletal muscles, cardiac muscle looks striped. The fibers of cardiac muscle form the 4 hollow areas of your heart, which are called chambers. When cardiac muscle contracts and relaxes, blood is pumped in and out of the chambers. Blood coming from your heart carries oxygen to your muscles and to other parts of your body. Cardiac muscle is involuntary. A special strip of cardiac muscle releases bursts of electricity that keep your heart beating in a regular rhythm. That rhythm is your heartbeat. Cardiac muscle contracts about 60 to 70 times a minute. When you are excited or get startled, the nervous system tells the heart to beat faster. Cardiac muscle rests between each contraction, so it never gets tired. Exercise those muscles. Muscles are made to move. Being active for an hour or more every day helps keep your muscles healthy. Muscles need 3 types of exercise to be at their best. Aerobic exercise makes you breathe faster and gets your heart pumping. Strength exercises help your muscles get stronger. And exercise that helps you stretch your muscles helps keep them flexible. Skateboarding, dancing, and gymnastics are some fun aerobic activities. Sports that make you run or move fast, like basketball, soccer, or hockey, are good aerobic exercise too. Aerobics are good for your cardiac muscle. Exercising your heart this way keeps it strong. It also helps your heart pump more oxygen through your body. Activity that makes your skeletal muscles work hard helps make them stronger. That gives them more power and helps them work longer before getting tired. Push-ups, riding your bike, and swinging across the monkey bars makes your muscles stronger. Playing baseball and tennis strengthens muscles too. Stretching keeps your skeletal muscles flexible so you can bend and reach better. Touching your toes or stretching your arms toward the ceiling are simple stretches you can do almost anywhere. Martial arts, dancing, tumbling, and gymnastics are fun activities that help you stretch your muscles and stay flexible. Whatever type of exercise you choose, being active keeps your muscles healthy. Muscles and sports. Doing the same action over and over helps your muscles remember it. This is called muscle memory. For example, when you practice dribbling a ball or doing a backflip, muscle memory helps your muscles do the action better and faster. Muscles that have been resting for a long time are cold and do not work as well as they could. Before playing a sport, it is important to warm up your muscles with a few minutes of light exercise, like jumping jacks or jogging. When your muscles are warmed up, they can take in more oxygen. This helps them contract with more power so you can run faster or jump higher. Muscle injuries. Muscles can be injured if they are used too hard or for too long at one time. Skeletal muscles get tired more quickly than other muscles. They need time to rest. An overworked muscle might contract too hard and not be able to relax. This can cause a painful cramp. Gently rubbing the sore area usually helps the muscle relax again. When a muscle is stretched too far, it is called a pulled muscle or a muscle strain. This kind of injury can cause the area around the muscle to bruise or get swollen. Resting your muscles when they feel weak or tired will help prevent injury. The muscles in your face. When you think about the muscles in your body, you probably don't think about your face, but it is full of muscles. Most facial muscles do not pull on your bones. Instead, they pull on your skin. Whether you are happy, sad, angry, or surprised, your facial muscles help you show your feelings. When you take a bite of food, you use the muscles in your jaws, lips, tongue, and cheeks. The muscles in your lips help keep food inside your mouth. Your jaws help your teeth grind up your food, and your tongue helps move food from your mouth to your throat. What would we do without muscles? Think about all the things your muscles do for you. You use muscles to open your eyes in the morning. You use muscles to get out of bed. Your cardiac muscle keeps blood moving through your body, and your smooth muscles help your organs do their jobs. Without muscles, you would not even be able to talk or eat. Your body could not live without muscles. Eating a variety of healthy foods and getting enough exercise every day will help keep your muscles strong and healthy. When you take good care of your muscles, they will take good care of you too. What are air masses and weather fronts? By Bobby Martin. Let's talk about the weather. People are always curious about the weather. We want to know if it will be warm or cold, sunny or rainy. This helps us decide what to wear. It also helps us plan what to do. Another reason we talk about the weather is because it is always changing. It can be sunny when we wake up, but raining by lunchtime. People who study the weather are called meteorologists. Some of the most important things meteorologists study are weather fronts. A weather front is the area between cold and warm bodies of air, called air masses. Watching weather fronts helps meteorologists forecast what the weather will be like, and that helps people plan better. What is weather? Weather is a mix of 5 different features. The first feature is temperature, meaning how warm or cold it is outside. Wind, the movement of air on Earth, is the second feature. Next is humidity, the amount of moisture in the air. High humidity makes us feel wet and sticky. Dry air has low humidity. The fourth feature of weather is precipitation. Rain, hail, sleet, and snow are types of precipitation. The final feature is atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric pressure is the weight of the air. Changes in atmospheric pressure help meteorologists predict weather. Falling pressure means rain is on the way. Rising pressure means nice weather is coming. Is it weather or climate? Weather happens every day, but it is not the same in all places. The kind of weather found in an area over a long period of time is called its climate. By studying the climate of a place, scientists have an idea of how many sunny days it will have each year. They know how much rain it usually gets and if it might snow there. Climate determines what kinds of plants can grow in a place and what kinds of animals can live there. Farmers use information about climate to decide which crops will do best in that area. Families use information about climates to decide where to live or to choose a good vacation spot. Air masses on the move. Wind is always blowing somewhere on Earth. Wind moves huge air masses. An air mass is a large region of air that all has about the same temperature and humidity. Some air masses are so big they stretch across thousands of miles. An air mass can be hot or cold, wet or dry, depending on where it forms. An air mass that forms over land is a continental air mass. Continental air masses that form over northern Canada and over Siberia in Russia are very cold. If the air mass forms over land near the equator, it will be hot. No matter where it forms, a continental air mass is dry. These air masses do not bring much rain. An air mass that develops over water is called a maritime air mass. These air masses have a lot of moisture. Maritime masses usually have milder temperatures than masses that form over land. Maritime air masses can be warm or cool. They will not be very hot or very cold. The maritime masses that form over the North Atlantic or North Pacific Oceans are cool. Maritime air masses that form over the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean Sea are warmer. They often bring fog and low clouds when they move onto land. In spring and summer, these warmer air masses can cause heavy rains or even thunderstorms. Meet me at the front. Have you ever wondered what causes storms? Weather fronts are responsible for many kinds of storms. A weather front is the zone between two different air masses. Weather fronts can be hundreds of miles across. The front may bring big changes in temperature and humidity. The wind often shifts directions, too. These factors cause changes in the weather. There are several types of weather fronts. Meteorologists know what type of front is by looking at two things. One is the direction that the colder air mass is moving. The second is what kind of air mass is replacing the other. Cold front. When a cold air mass moves into an area where a warm mass is, it creates a cold front. Cold fronts move faster than other fronts and can cause dangerous storms. Cold air is heavy. It forces the lighter, warmer air to rise. The warm air cools rapidly as it rises, and moisture in the air often turns into precipitation. In summer, this can cause heavy rain to fall or thunderstorms. In winter, a cold front can bring snowstorms. Usually the storms pass quickly, leaving cooler, drier air and clear skies. Sometimes a group of thunderstorms form in a line, one after the other. This is called a squall line. Warm front. Warm fronts move slower than cold fronts and spread out over a wider area. Because warm air is lighter than cold air, a warm air mass cannot push a cold air mass out of the way. Instead, the warm air mass is over the top of the cold air mass. In summer, warm fronts usually bring slow, steady rain that lasts for days. Sometimes they cause thunderstorms or hail. In winter, a warm front might bring a mix of rain, snow, sleet, or freezing rain, or maybe all of those. If the air in the colder mass is at or below freezing temperatures, a warm front may even cause an ice storm. Stationary front. Sometimes when a cold mass and a warm mass meet, both masses stay right where they are. Because the two air masses are stuck in one spot, meteorologists call this a stationary front. One reason why a stationary front does not move is that winds from the two air masses blow in opposite directions. It is like a pushing match in which neither side wins. If both air masses have low humidity, then no precipitation will fall. But if there is a lot of humidity in the warm air mass, it can rain for many days. Sometimes this causes flooding. In the winter, a stationary front can bring dangerous ice storms. Occluded front. Cold fronts move faster than warm fronts. When a fast-moving cold front catches up with a warm front, the result can be an occluded front. In this case, the warm air ahead of the cold front is pushed up away from the ground. The cold air then meets the other cold air mass that was ahead of the warm front. Occluded fronts often happen when two fronts circle a storm. In a cold occlusion, the air mass behind the cold front is colder than the cool air ahead of the front. The colder air plows under the cool air, pushing up the warm air in the middle and occluding it. In a warm occlusion, the cool air behind the front is not as cold as the air ahead of it. The cool mass is lighter than the colder air. Cool air cannot push cold air out of the way, so it slides over it. As it moves, the cool air pushes the warm air up and occludes it from the ground. Jet streams. You may have seen a meteorologist on TV talking about jet streams. These fast-moving wind currents move weather fronts. Jet streams can blow at speeds from 70 miles, 113 kilometers per hour, up to 240 miles, 386 kilometers per hour. They move faster in the winter and slower in the summer. We do not feel jet streams because they are miles above us. There are 2 or 3 jet stream systems in each hemisphere. The 2 systems that affect the United States are the polar front jet stream and the subtropical jet stream. Both jet streams move around Earth from west to east. They also move in a wavy north and south pattern that changes with the seasons. When El Niño and La Niña play. Every few years, a weather event called El Niño happens. The winds that blow across the South Pacific Ocean normally blow from east to west. However, El Niño causes these winds to slow down or even to reverse direction. This makes the water off the western coast of South America warmer than usual. This causes big changes in weather patterns everywhere. Some areas get too much rain. Other areas don't get enough rain. A La Niña event often follows an El Niño. The winds that get weaker during an El Niño become much stronger during a La Niña. This makes the water unusually cold from the eastern to the central Pacific. During a La Niña, the southeastern part of the United States has a warmer, drier winter than usual. However, the northwestern states are colder and wetter. Predicting changes in the weather. Our weather changes from day to day. It can be hot one day and stormy the next. The weather also changes with each season. North America has warmer temperatures in summer and colder weather in winter. But sometimes events like an El Niño change the normal weather pattern. With all these changes, how can a person make plans? Meteorologists watch jet streams, air masses, and weather fronts. They notice changes in atmospheric pressure, temperature, and humidity. Then they make forecasts. These help us plan for bad weather so we can stay safe. They also help us plan for fun events like an outdoor party. With forecasts, no matter what the weather will be, we'll be ready. What are weather instruments? By Joseph Camp. Talking about the weather. The weather is one of the most common topics of conversation. Most people make casual remarks about the weather, and that is enough for most of us. However, meteorologists, scientists who study the weather, want to know precisely how hot it is, how much it is raining, and from what direction the wind is blowing. Is it really freezing, or is it just very cold? Meteorologists use many instruments to answer these questions. After learning about weather instruments, you can describe the weather just like a meteorologist. What is the temperature? The thermometer is one of the oldest weather instruments still in use today. It measures temperature, or how hot or cold it is. The first thermometer was invented by an Italian scientist named Galileo in about 1592. Many different types of thermometers have been developed since then. The most basic type consists of a glass tube with liquid called mercury in it. Mercury expands when it heats up and shrinks when it cools down. These changes make the mercury level in the tube rise and fall. Markings on the outside of the tube show the degrees on a temperature scale. There are several different scales that measure temperature. The 2 most common are Fahrenheit and Celsius. The Fahrenheit scale is used in the United States for everyday measurements. On this scale, the freezing point of water is 32 degrees, and the boiling point is 212 degrees. The Celsius scale is used for scientific work and everyday weather measurements in much of the rest of the world. On this scale, the freezing point of water is 0 degrees, and the boiling point is 100 degrees. Barometers. The atmosphere is the layer of gas that surrounds Earth. It is often called air. The weight of the air is called atmospheric or barometric pressure. Meteorologists use barometers to measure this pressure. The atmosphere is always moving and changing, and atmospheric pressure changes with it. These changes are associated with the weather. Following the changes in atmospheric pressure helps meteorologists predict changes in weather. If the pressure is falling, stormy weather is probably on the way. Rising pressure usually means the return of nice weather. When pressure remains steady, the weather will probably stay the same.
Hygrometers. Humidity is the amount of moisture in the air. It is the element of the atmosphere that changes most frequently. Meteorologists measure humidity with a device called a hygrometer. Simple hygrometers measure humidity by using a hair attached to a spring and dial. As the humidity increases, the hair gets shorter. This action pulls the spring and makes the dial hand move. When the humidity is lower, the hair is longer. This reaction loosens the tension on the spring and allows the dial hand to move in the other direction. Knowing the humidity helps meteorologists predict when it will rain or snow. Rain gauges. Meteorologists measure the amount of rain that falls with a rain gauge. Rain gauges are open-mouthed containers that catch rain as it falls. A typical rain gauge is made up of a measuring tube with a funnel on top. Meteorologists can tell how much it has rained by comparing the water level with the measurement marks on the container. Another type of rain gauge is the tipping bucket rain gauge. This gauge automatically empties itself as the rain is measured. Knowing how much rain falls in an area helps farmers decide what crops to grow and when to plant and harvest them. Rain gauges also help scientists know when an area is getting too much or too little rain. Wind vanes. Studying wind is an important part of meteorology. The wind blowing around the world greatly affects climate and weather. Wind vanes, also known as weather vanes, tell us in which direction the wind is blowing. A simple wind vane is made of a piece of metal shaped like an arrow. The arrow turns until it faces the direction from which the wind is blowing. Winds are named for the direction from which they come. A wind that comes from the west is a west wind. Wind vanes help meteorologists track which way a storm is moving. Anemometers. Anemometers measure the speed of the wind. They look and work similar to wind vanes. In fact, many anemometers have wind vanes attached to them. An anemometer is made of 3 or 4 cups attached to the ends of arms. When the wind blows, it makes the anemometer spin. The faster the wind speed, the faster the anemometer turns. Meteorologists use anemometers to measure the strength of storms. Tropical storms have wind speeds of 39 miles, 63 kilometers per hour, or higher. A tropical storm becomes a hurricane when the wind speed goes over 74 miles, 119 kilometers per hour. The wind speed of a tornado can reach as high as 300 miles, 483 kilometers per hour. Weather balloons and radio zones. Weather balloons were originally used to study wind patterns. A balloon was sent into the air and carried by wind currents. People on the ground used telescopes to study the speed and direction of the balloon at different altitudes. Meteorologists eventually wanted more information on conditions higher up in the atmosphere. This desire led to the invention of the radiozone in the late 1930s. Radiozones are collections of instruments that are attached to weather balloons. As the balloons rise, radiozones record changes in air pressure, temperature, and humidity. This information is sent to the ground by radio. The balloons burst when they reach about 100,000 feet, 30,000 meters high. When that happens, the radiozone is carried to the ground by parachute. Ceilometers. A cloud is made up of millions of tiny water droplets or ice crystals floating together in the air. Meteorologists use ceilometers to measure the height of clouds. Ceilometers also measure the thickness of clouds. They shine a beam of light up at the clouds. The light is reflected from the clouds back to the ceilometer. Ceilometers use special telescopes to detect this reflection. Ceilometers can measure in the daytime or at night. Clouds often signal a weather change. Rising cloud levels mean the weather is clearing. Lower and thicker clouds mean it is going to rain. From the telegraph to the computer. The telegraph is a device for communicating. It uses electricity to send coded messages through wires. In the 1800s, the telegraph was the fastest way to communicate over long distances. It allowed scientists to collect and analyze data from many regions on Earth, including the oceans, deserts, and rainforests. In the 1900s, computers became valuable tools in meteorology. They replaced the telegraph for communicating information about weather. Computer programs also use mathematics to create models of weather patterns. These models can reliably forecast the weather up to 30 days ahead of time. Weather satellites. The first weather satellite was launched into space in the 1960s. Weather satellites give meteorologists information about the atmosphere.
Meteorologists use weather satellites to photograph weather systems, such as storms, around the world. This ability makes it possible for meteorologists to see changes in weather as soon as the changes happen. Weather satellites provide photographs that make it possible to find and follow weather systems from the moment they form. Satellites also send lots of information on atmospheric conditions to scientists on the ground. Today, large storms are unlikely to strike without warning because weather satellites allow meteorologists to see them coming. Weather satellites make communicating about the weather faster than ever. Radar. Radar is a system that uses waves of energy to sense objects. Radar can find a faraway object and tell how fast it is moving. Radar units send radio waves, which are invisible streams of energy, into the air. When the waves hit an object, they bounce back to the radar unit. By measuring how long it takes the waves to return, the radar can tell how far away the object is. Radar can also tell where a moving object is headed and at what speed. Sometimes it can tell how big objects are. Radar systems are one of the best ways to detect and track hurricanes, thunderstorms, tornadoes, and other powerful storms. Do it yourself. Meteorologists use many instruments to measure, predict, and talk about the weather. But they are not the only people who use weather instruments. You can use an outdoor thermometer and barometer to keep track of the temperature and atmospheric pressure in your neighborhood. Home improvement stores sell inexpensive hygrometers that you can use to measure the humidity in your garden or right outside your window. And you can easily make a rain gauge, a wind vane, and an anemometer yourself. You may have some trouble getting your hands on a radiosonde or a ceilometer, but you can definitely attach a helium balloon to a long string and use it as a miniature weather balloon. You can even use the internet to see satellite images from space and track weather patterns on radar. But be careful. Weather conditions can be dangerous, especially if there is lightning around.
Steve Jobs, founder of Apple Inc., Sarah Makajewski, changing the world. Picture the following scenes. A woman in New York uses a computer to talk face-to-face with a friend in Tokyo. On a city bus, a teenager listens to music on a device he can fit in his pocket. You're woken up for school by an alarm clock that's actually a phone. Today, these situations are part of normal life, but they weren't always. Computers can do these things because of the visionary mind of Steve Jobs, the co-founder and late Chief Executive Officer, CEO, of Apple Inc. Steve Jobs didn't invent computers. He just changed the way people thought about them. Jobs pushed computers' capabilities to their limits. Then he redefined them. Because of his innovation, computers that were once giant machines seen only in the workplace are now devices that help regular people do almost anything. Steve Jobs, pictured here in 2007, holds the earliest version of the Apple iPhone. It's considered by many to be a device that changed the world. Starting young. On February 24, 1955, in San Francisco, California, a young unmarried college student gave birth to a baby boy. She decided to place the baby up for adoption. A couple named Paul and Clara Jobs adopted the baby. They named their new son Stephen Paul Jobs. Jobs' parents were very involved in his life. His mother taught him how to read before he started school, and his father taught him skills that would be useful later in life. Jobs and his father spent a lot of time together. His dad set aside an area of the garage that became Steve's workspace. He taught Jobs how to build things, take them apart, and put them back together. Jobs once remarked that these moments were good for him and taught him a lot. Jobs' creativity began in his parents' garage, which is now an important place in computer history. Early confidence. The Jobs family moved to Mountain View, California when Steve was 5 years old. Today, this town is in an area called Silicon Valley because it's the heart of the United States computer and technology industries. Living Living in this area meant Jobs was surrounded by tech-minded people from an early age. One such person was a neighbor named Larry Lang. Lang built electronics from pieces that came in kits. After observing Lang's work, Jobs took up these kits as a hobby. Building the electronics kits made a deep impression on Jobs. It gave him an understanding of how electronics work, but it also taught him that it was possible to build anything he saw around him. This early confidence, gained through learning and exploring, would stay with Jobs throughout his life. Larry Lang introduced Jobs to health kits, which became his childhood hobby. The device pictured here is one example of what health kit electronics offered in the 1960s. Unconventional learning. Steve Jobs was very smart, but he was also a troublemaker. When he was in 4th grade, his mischief led him to meet someone who had a great impact on his life. Mrs. Hill taught the 4th grade advanced class, and she found a way to get Jobs excited about school again. She said she'd give him money and candy if he did well on his homework. This kind of unconventional learning made an impression on Jobs, who said he learned more that year than any other time in his education. Meeting Woz. In 1971, when Jobs was in high school, he met Steve Wozniak. Woz, as he was called, was a student at the University of California, Berkeley, who also had a knack for electronics. Jobs and Wozniak bonded over their common interest, which was unusual at a time when few people knew about computer programming. After high school, Jobs enrolled at Reed College in Oregon. He dropped out after only 6 months. In 1974, he was hired as a video game designer for Atari Inc., but left there soon after he started too. Jobs traveled to India and studied a religion called Buddhism. Later that year, Jobs returned to California and reconnected with Woz. The work that followed changed the computer industry forever. Jobs and Wozniak's first business venture was selling a device Wozniak designed called the Blue Box. This device allowed people to hack into phone lines without having to pay for long-distance calls. The men are pictured here in 1977. The Homebrew Computer Club. After Jobs returned to California, he started going to meetings of a group called the Homebrew Computer Club, in which Wozniak also took part. Its members were people who shared the same love for and interest in computers. The meetings were designed for members to trade ideas and information. It was also a forum to talk about rumors in the computer industry and show off new computer parts or members' own inventions. At this time, computers were used mostly in businesses. They were big and expensive, and few were available to consumers. However, research labs were exploring the idea of personal computing. Jobs believed in that idea. He envisioned a world where computers did more than run numbers for businesses. He saw them in the homes of regular people. California was the right place to be for a computer lover like Jobs in the 1970s. At this time, personal computing was just slightly more than an idea. Jobs was ready to make it a reality. Planting Apple's seeds. The Homebrew Computer Club was very important to the future of computers. It was during those meetings that Wozniak showed off a small computer he built. With only a few chips, a video screen, and a personal keyboard, the machine was designed for hobbyists, not to be used in business. Jobs was inspired. He felt this computer was the one that could bring computers into people's homes. Luckily, Wozniak shared this vision. The two teamed up and founded Apple Computers, Inc. on April 1, 1976. Jobs and Wozniak started their company with $1,300 of their own money. Working off Wozniak's original design, The pair designed Apple's first computer in Jobs' bedroom at his parents' house. It's said they built the very first model in his parents' garage. They named it the Apple I. The Apple I consisted only of a circuit board, which is pictured here. Raising money. Jobs and Wozniak faced a challenge when they started their company. Where would they get money to build computers? They pooled their money and received a nearly $50,000 order from a local computer store, but they still didn't have enough. Determined to succeed, Jobs went to a local parts supplier. He convinced the store to give them parts on credit, even though they didn't own anything they could put up as collateral. Wozniak said this happened because Jobs was very persuasive. Introducing the Apple I. The Apple I was introduced to the public in 1976. The computer, which was simply a circuit board, didn't have a monitor to display information or a keyboard to enter information. Users had to buy those themselves. However, the technology was innovative compared to what was available at the time. It allowed users to load computer programs from other machines. Unlike other computers, it didn't require extra circuit boards to display text. Jobs and Wozniak's innovative computer sold for $666, and it appealed mostly to hobbyists. A store called the Byte Shop sold more than 200 units, and in the end, the company earned around $774,000 from sales of the Apple I. It was successful, but it didn't revolutionize home computing the way Jobs envisioned. However, it set the stage for the product that eventually did.
The Apple I's success opened many doors for the two young entrepreneurs. A former executive at Intel, a computer chip manufacturer, invested $250,000 in Apple. This allowed Apple production to move out of Jobs' parents' garage.
The revolutionary Apple II. Personal computing changed forever in April 1977 when Jobs and Wozniak introduced a new computer at the West Coast Computer Fair in San Francisco. It was called the Apple II. The Apple II was unlike any other computer at that time. The computer had a built-in keyboard and power supply, and it contained all the necessary electronics inside a slim, compact frame. It was the first computer that had color graphics, which means it was able to produce images in color. The Apple II also stood out for its ability to be customized or changed to meet a user's needs. Jobs marketed Wozniak's breakthrough technology as an extraordinary computer for ordinary people, focusing on the computer's simplicity. It worked. Apple's sales skyrocketed from $7.8 million in 1978 to $600 million in 1981. Jobs' vision for Apple and its products was to create a tool that could be used at home, school, or work. While Wozniak was the mind behind the technology, Jobs' natural ability to sense what people wanted made the Apple II extremely successful, setting the standard. Jobs had a knack for being able to see the future of computer technology. In 1979, he visited a Xerox Corporation research center. He saw a personal computer with commands controlled by a point-and-click tool. It also had a video display that featured documents and programs. Jobs remarked in a 1995 interview that within 10 minutes, he knew every computer would work that way someday. It was so clear. Jobs took that inspiration back to Apple. In 1984, he debuted another pioneering technology, the Macintosh computer. Users commanded the computer with a mouse rather than typing out complex commands, which was how computers worked until then. It had folders, icons, and a video display. Marketed as a computer for the rest of us, The Macintosh became the standard in home computing. The Macintosh was very successful, but Jobs refused to make it compatible with products made by IBM, one of Apple's biggest competitors. Other Apple executives disagreed, which eventually led Jobs to leave the company. Revolutionary advertising. The Macintosh was known as much for its revolutionary advertising as it was for its innovative technology. Steve Jobs hired an advertising firm to make a commercial for the computer with one request. He wanted to stop the world in its tracks. During the 1984 Super Bowl, an ad aired in which a woman, who represents Apple, rebels against a Big Brother-type figure, which is meant to represent a government keeping its people in the dark. The ad told consumers that Apple gave them the power of technology. Today, the commercial is iconic, telling stories. Jobs left Apple in 1985 over disagreements about how the company should be run. He took his pioneering sensibilities with him and found himself in the world of animation. Jobs met George Lucas, the director of the popular Star Wars movies, in 1986. Lucas wanted to sell the technology company he'd founded that developed film editing software. Jobs purchased the computer graphics division and created the company that would be named Pixar Animation Studios. Jobs once said the goal of Pixar was to revolutionize computer graphics, but its vision was to tell stories. Almost 10 years after Jobs' purchase, the company released the world's first computer-animated feature film, Toy Story. The movie was a huge hit, and Jobs became a billionaire. In 2006, the Walt Disney Corporation purchased Pixar for $7.4 billion. Steve Jobs became a board member at Disney after it purchased Pixar. The studio went on to release many wildly popular movies, including Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and Brave. Think different. In 1997, Jobs returned to Apple. The company was failing, and many people believed it was headed for bankruptcy. Jobs used his connections to make a deal with Microsoft, a software company, to offer its products for Apple computers. Next, Apple introduced a personal computer called the iMac, which was the best-selling personal computer in 1998. Thanks to Jobs' efforts, the company made a profit once again. The Think Different campaign changed how people viewed Apple. It made the company seem revolutionary and, more importantly, cool, something that helped increase sales. Around this time, Jobs made the decision to roll out a historic marketing campaign called Think Different. Those words appeared over black and white photographs of important visionaries who had changed the world. When paired with the Apple logo, it presented the company's computers as revolutionary. The marketing campaign was a great success. iPad, iPhone, iCEO. Jobs became Apple's CEO in 2000. Jobs set his sights on a growing industry, digital media players. Apple launched iTunes, a music and video file program, in 2001. Free and easy to use, iTunes was one of the first programs of its kind. Jobs hit another home run later that year when Apple debuted the iPod. The tiny music player changed how people listened to music. It allowed users to carry around 1,000 media files in a pocket-sized machine. The iPod is considered one of the most revolutionary products of the 2000s. In 2007, Apple debuted the iPhone. The touchscreen device was a cell phone, iPod, and computer all in one. Apple sold 1.4 million iPhones in just 3 months, and it was named Time Magazine's Invention of the Year. Steve Jobs launched Apple's most important products during the company's annual Macworld conference. His usual outfit of blue jeans, black turtleneck, and wire-rimmed glasses became almost as famous as the products themselves.
A true visionary. In 2010, Jobs debuted the Apple iPad. This product launched the tablet industry and became Apple's fastest-selling product ever. With the eyes of the world watching the launch, people noticed something else. Jobs didn't look healthy. Unknown to many, Jobs had suffered serious health problems. He was diagnosed with cancer in 2003 and had a liver transplant in 2009. In 2011, in failing health, Jobs stepped down as Apple's CEO. He died on October 5, 2011, at the age of 56. Steve Jobs was a pioneer, not just for his technical skills, but for his ability to see the power of society's relationship with technology. His legacy is everywhere, from the computer in your home to the phone in your pocket. For his innovation and creativity, Jobs is remembered as a visionary.
Steve Jobs spent his life doing what he loved. He once said, "The only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it." Super Women Role Models. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Heather Moore Niver.
Notorious RBG. Ruth Bader Ginsburg may be small in stature, but the role she's played in the fight for equality for all Americans is anything but small. How did this Supreme Court justice get the nickname the Notorious RBG, which is a play on the name of the famously large and tough rapper, the Notorious B.I.G.? Ruth has fiercely fought for equality, especially women's rights. Her thoughts and opinions are strong, whether she's in court or in public. She's definitely a force to be reckoned with. Ruth was the second woman to be named a justice of the United States Supreme Court, after Sandra Day O'Connor. Ruth is currently the oldest justice on the bench, but she's far from finished with her work toward equality for all.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg has gained fame and earned respect for her strong opinions and the way she fights for what she believes in. Not an easy childhood. On March 15, 1933, Ruth Joan Bader was born to Nathan and Celia Bader. Ruth was raised in Brooklyn, New York, during the Great Depression, which was a period of worldwide economic hardship and unemployment. Ruth's father worked as a furrier. Unfortunately, not many people bought furs during the Great Depression. It was a tough time for people, including the Baders. Ruth had a sister, Marilyn, but she died when Ruth was still young. Celia Bader taught her daughters how important it was to get a good education. Ruth's mother didn't go to college. She worked in a factory making clothes in order to pay for her brother to go to college. Celia also taught her daughters to be independent women who could think for themselves. Ruth grew up during a difficult time in American history. Her parents, especially her mother, taught her how important it was to be strong and smart. School days. Celia never got to see her daughter go to college. She died of cancer the day before Ruth graduated from James Madison High School. Ruth then attended Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, where she met another law student named Martin Ginsburg, who was often called Marty. They married in 1954, shortly after Ruth graduated at the very top of her class. Later that year,